Chapter 51. The Junqing Mountain stood amidst towering peaks and rugged ridges. This area was sparsely populated and closed to the public due to the presence of wild beasts. However, Su Chen and his master, possessing formidable martial prowess, feared no wild creatures. Coupled with their exceptional medical skills, the miasma of the forest posed no threat to them. Thus, they could live comfortably within the mountain forests. They purchased daily necessities from the villagers at the mountain's base. Junqing parked his car at the foot of the mountain and proceeded on foot, instructing his subordinates not to follow. Although Su Chen's master, after sustaining severe injuries, was not significantly stronger than Junqing in terms of martial power, her sensory abilities allowed her to perceive a vast area around her. Junqing couldn't take the risk, so he chose to ascend the mountain alone. His subordinates vehemently tried to dissuade him. "Young master, there really are wild beasts on the mountain, even great worms. At least let someone accompany you." "Young master, you're not Wusong," Baldy pleaded, even considering calling Junqing's father. Otherwise, if anything happened to the young master, they would all face severe consequences. The mention of Wusong reminded Junqing of the time he and Li Zixiu drugged Su Chen. Su Chen was like Wu Dalin, tricked by Li Zixiu into drinking croton water. It was partly due to his own peculiar preferences, unlike the pitiable Wu Dalin. Junqing felt like laughing but restrained himself. Some of his subordinates still didn't know Junqing's true strength. "Baldy, come here, fight me. If you win, I won't go up, and I'll even reward you with 10 million, Junqing said with amusement. "Young master, 10 million just for beating you? Should I eat another pile of shit instead? That way, I'd feel less guilty taking the money," Baldy joked. A vein throbbed on Junqing's forehead. No wonder so many people found Baldy irritating. Even Junqing felt provoked. For instance, Zhuyue, standing beside Baldy, had long wanted to beat him up but couldn't defeat him, daring to mock the young master. "Even if you beat him, you'd still face consequences," Zhuyue muttered to himself. Had Baldy lost his mind? "Young master, no offense, but even with one hand tied behind my back and carrying heavy gear, I could still defeat you," Baldy declared confidently, certain of victory. "Humph," Junqing sneered. Baldy's arrogance made up his mind. If he didn't thoroughly thrash him this time, he wouldn't bear the Gu family name. True to his word, Baldy attacked using only one hand. Junqing caught Baldy's fist and stomped hard on his foot. "Ah!" Baldy yelped, releasing his grip to clutch his foot. "Young master, that's dirty. Stepping on toes is a child's trick." Not wanting to waste more time, Junqing unleashed his full strength with a punch aimed at Baldy. Baldy tried to mimic Junqing's earlier move, but the force of the blow horrified him. It felt overwhelming. His face took the hit, and he was sent flying. In truth, Junqing was somewhat surprised by Baldy's strength. His combat power exceeded 100. No wonder the Gu family had sent him for protection, though Junqing no longer needed it. Baldy stared blankly, realizing he truly couldn't defeat Junqing. "Young master, when did you become so powerful?" Baldy lamented. Zhuyue was equally dumbfounded, unable to believe what was happening before his eyes. "I happened to receive guidance from a master, and I'm now going to meet her," Junqing said calmly. "Moreover, if there's real danger, I'll be the one protecting you all. So it's better for me to go in alone." He had revealed some of his strength this time, but only to his subordinates. He also needed to show some capability to his family so his parents could confidently entrust the Gu family to him. Additionally, this would boost his authority among his subordinates. Although his prestige was already high, it hadn't been established through martial prowess. Only then did Baldy and Zhuyue agree to let Junqing enter this clearly treacherous mountainous area. Looking at the towering trees and hearing the occasional wolf howl, Baldy sighed. No wonder Junqing insisted on coming here. Junqing strode inside, telling them to wait in the village at the mountain's base since he wasn't sure how long he'd be. He would call if needed. As for whether there was signal deep in the mountains, Junqing assured them not to worry at all. There was still a satellite constantly tracking him, providing real-time signals. This was specially requested by Junqing. Since he now controlled some of the Gu family's forces, it was crucial for him to stay connected. If any movements or emergencies occurred, he could be informed immediately and handle them. Junqing headed toward the location described in the book. The over 10,000 villain points he previously possessed had all been used in the lottery draw. The current Su Chen posed little threat to him, and he had basically exchanged all items needed for subsequent plans, so there was no need to save villain points. Host: Junqing. Combat power: 320. Average person: 5. Charm: 120. Beyond limits. Great villain luck: 1300. Villain points: 0. Skills: Divine medical skill, Grandmaster level piano, Grandmaster level learning ability, Grandmaster level appraisal technique, Master level racing driver. Auras: Female lead charm aura, Mosquito repellent aura. Talent: Golden eyes, second stage. Items: a Mercedes parking ticket at the foot of Mount Tai, a lost sheep, a bottle of beast milk snatched from a child, Patek Philippe, Bugatti Veyron, a slipper, a ring once worn by an elder, bronze mask, 10 billion in cash. Junqing looked at the newly added auras section. The female lead charm aura gave him a plus 20 innate favorability from female leads, while mosquito repellent prevented him from being bothered by poisonous creatures and mosquitoes. The mosquito repellent aura's function was understandable, but the female lead charm aura, combined with his beyond limit charm, was simply perfect. Even Gu Junqing himself wondered how future female leads could possibly resist his charm. Calling the current Gu Junqing a female lead harvesting machine wouldn't be an exaggeration. Moreover, his combat power had broken through 300, and his charm had climbed further after surpassing its limits, enabling him to gain favor even from female leads with higher-tier auras. However, there were more strange items among the goods. What was this bronze ghost mask that looked like it was crying and laughing at the same time? It seemed quite impressive. Without examining it carefully, Gu Junqing stored it away in the system. After all, any karma resulting from the bizarre items obtained from the roulette wheel had absolutely nothing to do with him, Gu Junqing. Right system. Chapter 52. The forest was steeped in silence. Looking up, sunlight filtered through the canopy, shimmering like scattered stars in the sky, exceptionally clear and beautiful, yet imbued with an elusive tranquility. However, Gu Junqing possessed hearing far beyond that of ordinary people. The faint rustling of insects avoiding his presence and the distant, intermittent beast roars remained distinctly audible to his ears. Gu Junqing walked for a long time before arriving at a clearing devoid of trees. He had discovered the location of Su Chen's master, Zhuyue. Not daring to get too close, he observed the movements within from a distance, wary of being detected by Zhuyue. Gu Junqing narrowed his eyes, contemplating his next move. He had no intention of approaching her directly, as that would easily arouse suspicion. After a moment's thought, Gu Junqing turned back to search for the dwelling of some large creature. He headed toward the direction where he had earlier heard the beast roar, all the while staying alert to his surroundings. Before long, Gu Junqing indeed discovered traces of a tiger. However, the tiger had already eaten its fill, and was lying lazily in the distance. Upon seeing Gu Junqing, it showed no intention of chasing him. Perhaps it was saving him for its next meal. Left with no other choice, Gu Junqing began to approach the tiger gradually. Surprisingly, the tiger seemed unperturbed by his approach. It licked its paw and scratched its head, seemingly thinking that this two-legged creature must have something wrong with it to dare come so close. It even wondered if eating him would make it stupid too, a genuine tiger life dilemma. Seeing the tiger now staring intently at him, Gu Junqing took out a water spray spear he had won from a lucky draw and sprayed water at the tiger. Drenched from head to toe, the tiger roared in fury at the provocation from this two-legged creature. The roar reverberated in Gu Junqing's ears. Perhaps this was what they called bloodline suppression. But Gu Junqing felt not an ounce of fear. All fear stems not from the unknown, but from insufficient firepower. With his current strength, Gu Junqing could handle several tigers without breaking a sweat. Seeing the tiger charging toward him, Gu Junqing hurriedly ran toward Zhuyue's clearing, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Help! Help!" Fortunately, he hadn't brought anyone else along, or his carefully crafted persona would have shattered in an instant. Inside her dwelling, Zhuyue was recuperating from her injuries. Her condition could only be stabilized, not cured, leaving her somewhat weary. Even her own medical skills were insufficient to heal her, a classic case of the physician cannot heal himself. Su Chen's medical expertise was still lacking, so he couldn't treat her either. Thus, she could only manage her injuries in this prolonged state. Suddenly, she heard cries for help. She was puzzled. Since she had sent Su Chen down the mountain, no one had come up to this place. Could it be Chen'er? Startled, Zhuyue quickly donned her cloak and mask. She leaped out, her movements agile and graceful. With a single tap of her toes, she soared several meters through the air. In one swift motion, she landed on a tall tree. Below, a tiger weighing several hundred pounds was chasing a tall, slender figure. However, it wasn't Su Chen. Zhuyue's heart, which had been in her throat, settled back down. Should I save him? She hesitated inwardly. As the tiger and Gu Junqing drew closer, Zhuyue gradually caught a clear glimpse of Gu Junqing's face. Looking at this face, which retained its handsome contours even while fleeing in disarray, the soft strands of hair at his forehead fluttering upward in an elegant arc, his black hair contrasting with his pitch-black eyes like sparkling obsidian, Zhuyue felt her heart inexplicably beat a little faster. Ding. Female lead charm aura activated. Zhuyue's favorability toward the host plus 20. Current favorability 20. Villain points 4,000. Gu Junqing inwardly grumbled. He had also sensed Zhuyue's arrival, but couldn't she hurry up and make a move? This was really beneath his dignity. To make this act more convincing, Gu Junqing pretended to be exhausted from running, deliberately slowing down to let the tiger catch up more easily. The tiger watched as the two-legged creature before it began panting heavily. It was the first time it had seen a two-legged creature run so fast. Running for so long had exhausted the tiger as well. But seeing the human about to collapse, a cruel glint flashed in the tiger's eyes as it swiped its claw across Gu Junqing's back. Gu Junqing's back immediately began bleeding profusely, with 3 deep claw marks torn into it. Gu Junqing pretended to stumble and fell to the ground. Seizing the opportunity, he quickly swallowed the injury weakness pill he had exchanged, making himself appear weak. Otherwise, with the blood and energy circulation from the Yellow Emperor's inner cannon, his wounds would likely heal quickly. Moreover, such minor injuries meant nothing to him. If Zhuyue were to examine him later and find nothing wrong, his act would be exposed. His body's recovery ability had long surpassed that of an ordinary person. These wounds were practically insignificant. Seeing Gu Junqing injured, Zhuyue's heart tightened. She swiftly leaped down, ready to intervene. Roar. The tiger, seeing the two-legged creature finally pinned to the ground, let out a triumphant roar, and even patted Gu Junqing's head with its paw, looking immensely pleased. Gu Junqing clenched his fists, tempted to just kill this stupid tiger. Its roar was deafening. When another two-legged creature seemed to fly down from a tree, the tiger roared again. But it didn't move. Besides, it was already full. Eating another two-legged creature might make it burst, so it decided to abandon the idea and return to its territory. Gu Junqing was dumbfounded. Did this count as Zhuyue saving him when she had merely made an appearance? How was he supposed to use the excuse of her great kindness to stay with her? How could he exploit her gratitude? Normally, exploiting gratitude meant holding a favor over someone else's head and expecting repayment. But Gu Junqing's plan was to claim that Zhuyue had done him a great kindness, forcing him to stay and repay her. As the effects of the injury weakness pill gradually took hold, Gu Junqing felt his body grow weak. Catching only a blurry glimpse of a shadow, he lost consciousness. Zhuyue looked at the unconscious man before her, hesitating whether to take him back and save him. But the striking impression he had left on her earlier solidified her resolve. She didn't want to trust outsiders anymore. The severe injuries she bore were the result of falling into a trap set by outsiders. One could only say, despicable outsiders. Still, Gu Junqing didn't seem like a bad person, so she was willing to save him. Lifting Gu Junqing, she grabbed him by the collar and, with a single leap, vanished into the forest. Had Gu Junqing witnessed this, he would have been utterly astonished, because even with his current abilities, he couldn't so effortlessly lift a man weighing over 100 pounds with one hand while still executing the light body skill. Zhuyue placed Gu Junqing on the soft cushion, gazing at his pale face as if he had lost too much blood, and felt an involuntary stir in her heart. Gu Junqing's pallid complexion made his handsome features appear somewhat fragile, evoking a sense of pity in Zhuyue. Why am I feeling this way? How could I experience such changes upon seeing him for the first time? Am I ill? But why, even though it's my first time seeing him, do I feel this urge to explore more about him, as if I've known him for a long time? Zhuyue's perpetually cool face, usually hidden behind a mask, couldn't help but show confusion. Unbeknownst to her, this was the effect of the female lead charm aura. Whenever a female lead first laid eyes on Gu Junqing, she would find him exceptionally familiar and feel a greatly enhanced fondness for him. Chapter 53. Of course, the female lead charm aura only provided an opportunity to increase favorability by 20 points, while Gu Junqing's extraordinary handsomeness and charm were the true key factors. Zhuyue checked Gu Junqing's pulse and found it extremely weak. She then turned him over and saw that the wounds from the tiger's claws were still bleeding. She quickly sprinkled her specially made medicinal powder on Gu Junqing's wounds and carefully bandaged them. When removing Gu Junqing's upper garment, Zhuyue blushed beneath her mask. It was the first time she had ever undressed a man. Even Su Chen had only been close to her during his childhood. After he grew up, Zhuyue paid him no further attention, leaving him to fend for himself. This was why Su Chen, even as an adult, remained unaware of whether his master was male or female. Zhuyue meticulously bandaged Gu Junqing's wounds. Though she had mentally prepared herself, her fingers trembled slightly when touching his body, and her face grew increasingly flushed. After the bandaging was complete, Gu Junqing slowly opened his eyes. He had no choice but to do so. He had actually woken up the moment he lay down on the bed. If Zhuyue continued touching him, he would surely give himself away. The injury weakness pill, while slowing blood circulation and making the body appear weak, essentially functioned like a sedative, merely ensuring a good rest. To put it simply, it created a state of weakness without complete debilitation, and its effects were time-limited. However, once the effects wore off, the body's fatigued cells and blood would fully rejuvenate after sufficient rest, becoming even more vibrant than before and enhancing one's potential. This was the primary purpose of the elixir, and the key reason it was worth 2,000 villain points. Did you save me? Gu Junqing asked, feigning weakness. Zhuyue looked into Gu Junqing's eyes, which remained bright and spirited even in his weakened state, and felt a flutter in her heart. Ahem, no. The tiger ran off on its own. I merely bandaged your wounds since you were injured. There's no need for thanks. You should descend the mountain soon. Zhuyue altered her voice to a neutral tone, making it difficult to discern her gender. Gu Junqing was left speechless, cursing that damned tiger inwardly as he gritted his teeth. His only option now was to shamelessly cling to the situation. Gu Junqing quickly pretended to stir excitedly and get out of bed. No, senior. I know it must have been you who saved me. Frowning, he placed a hand over his heart and spoke with feigned sincerity. It really wasn't me who saved you, Zhuyue replied helplessly. Senior, please say no more. I understand you don't want me to feel indebted or obligated, but I, Gu Junqing, am not that kind of person. Rest assured, senior, I will repay your kindness properly, Gu Junqing declared resolutely. Zhuyue pressed a small hand to her forehead. This man looked so handsome and carried an air of nobility, yet his behavior was so shameless. Say no more. If you continue, I'll send you down the mountain immediately, Zhuyue said, feigning indifference. Gu Junqing immediately dropped to one knee and clung to Zhuyue's leg. Senior, I must repay your kindness. You can't send me away. How can I repay you if I leave? Gu Junqing put on a deeply distressed expression, as if unable to fulfill his duty of gratitude. Zhuyue was truly defeated by Gu Junqing's shamelessness, and could only assure him that he could stay for a few more days. Gu Junqing saw this and finally breathed a sigh of relief. If he had left earlier, everything would have been ruined. Having achieved his goal, Gu Junqing stood up, brushed off the dust, and returned to his demeanor of a refined gentleman in a corrupted world. He then pinched his hand, as if trying to recall a sensation, and murmured with emotion, the feel was really good, and it was even a bit fragrant. Zhuyue, of course, heard him clearly. Her eyes narrowed, her face flushed with embarrassment, and she shot Gu Junqing a glare. But Gu Junqing pretended not to notice and asked curiously, "Senior, why are you hiding under a cloak and wearing a mask? Are you a man, or a woman?" Zhuyue altered her voice again, making it sound more masculine. "What do you think I am? I was burned on the face when I was young and didn't want to scare you." "Oh, I see," Gu Junqing replied, feigning understanding. He then asked, "So, senior, are you living here alone in seclusion?" "All right, stop calling me senior. If you must call me something." Zhuyue hesitated for a moment, thinking of a name. "Just call me Uncle Zhu. I live in seclusion alone to avoid the disturbances of this mundane world." Zhuyue put on the expression of an enlightened master, thinking this demeanor might make Gu Junqing less audacious. She couldn't stand how he had just been shameless one moment, and now was acting like a gentleman. She suspected Gu Junqing's face had the ability to stretch, sometimes thick, sometimes thin. If Gu Junqing knew what she was thinking, he would only tell her, too naive. "It's not just my face that can stretch." Just as Gu Junqing was about to ask another question, Zhuyue interrupted him with a headache. All right, focus on recovering. Your wounds are still prone to reopening, and another major bleed would be bad." With a headache, Zhuyue walked out, no longer wanting to deal with Gu Junqing. Gu Junqing breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had managed to stay, so there shouldn't be any major issues now. The next step was to focus on winning over Zhuyue's heart. He lay back down on the bed, but hissed and stood up as soon as he touched his wound. He had forgotten about his injuries. If he hadn't used the bitter flesh strategy, it would have been difficult to stay. That's why he hadn't dodged when the tiger swiped at him, only shifting slightly to avoid being gutted outright. Gu Junqing sat cross-legged, contemplating his next move. Meanwhile, in her room, Zhuyue let out a heavy sigh. Her stunning face, now unmasked, was flushed red. Earlier, when Gu Junqing had hugged her leg, she had felt him brush against it with his hand, a touch that nearly made her lose her balance. If she hadn't known that Gu Junqing might not realize she was a woman, she would have been tempted to strike him down. Zhuyue prepared the medicinal herbs for Gu Junqing's wounds. It was a specially formulated remedy for treating animal scratches, though she had never tested it before. She wasn't sure if it would work, or if there were any side effects. She rarely went down the mountain, and had never tested it on villagers. Since she never needed it herself, she hesitated about whether to give it to Gu Junqing. As she hesitated, a thought suddenly crossed her mind. Why can't I use this scoundrel as a guinea pig? Why do I care so much about him? I'm not usually like this. Indeed, when Zhuyue usually treated illnesses, even if she came up with some prescriptions herself without prior testing, she would directly administer them to patients. Even her disciple Su Chen had served as her guinea pig several times. Yet this time, she seemed somewhat hesitant. Zhuyue shook her head, deciding not to dwell on it further. She put on her mask again, and headed to the room where Gu Junqing was staying with the prescription in hand. The place where Gu Junqing was currently staying originally belonged to Su Chen. Since Gu Junqing had arrived urgently, she had no choice but to accommodate him in Su Chen's quarters, as the other rooms had not been tidied up. The entire clearing had been enclosed by Zhuyue to form a courtyard. All the buildings here were constructed voluntarily by the farmers and workers from the foot of the mountain, whom she had treated, as an expression of their gratitude. Chapter 54. Zhuyue entered Gu Junqing's room with the medicine. She saw Gu Junqing sitting cross-legged on the bed, with dappled sunlight falling upon his face. His expression was solemn and almost sacred. With thin lips and a handsome profile, his features were impeccably sculpted. His face was sharply defined with extraordinary beauty. Hearing someone enter, Gu Junqing opened his eyes. Zhuyue stared blankly at him. His clear eyes seemed to contain the essence of heaven and earth, pure yet unfathomably deep. She felt he had changed again, now appearing lofty and unattainable like an immortal. Seeing it was her, Gu Junqing immediately put on an ingratiating smile. He looked at Zhuyue with eager flattery. Observing his sycophantic expression, Zhuyue sighed in relief. She thought to herself, it must have been my imagination. That divine demeanor just now was probably more like the heavenly hound. Had Gu Junqing known what she was thinking, he probably wouldn't have bothered maintaining this innocent facade. The reason for his current behavior was that he was essentially living under her roof. He hadn't successfully pursued the female lead yet, and he had just checked Zhuyue's stats. They were so impressive that he could not help wanting to become her sycophant. Female lead, Zhuyue. Age, 30. Combat power, 528. Charm value, 97. Favorability towards host, 30. Female lead aura, 3,472. Even with her current injuries, Zhuyue's combat power was 200 points higher than Gu Junqing's. If fully recovered, her combat power would reach 754, which was double his current level. This put considerable pressure on Gu Junqing. Zhuyue's stats were too luxurious, and her female lead aura was exceptionally high. She probably was not solely connected to Su Chen, as there would likely be other protagonists later. If he could successfully pursue Zhuyue, Gu Junqing would not need to worry about Su Chen's threat anymore. No wonder Gu Junqing considered relying on her. His only consideration now was whether to take advantage of her support assertively or submissively. Figuring out how to proceed was crucial. The female lead charm aura had already given Zhuyue 20 points of favorability toward him, almost reaching love at first sight. Without this aura, the female lead probably would not have given Gu Junqing a second glance. Her female lead aura far surpassed his, making it difficult for him to attract her, even with his charm exceeding the limit by 20 points. Of course, if Gu Junqing's charm far exceeded the limit, becoming devastatingly, nation-runningly handsome, that would be another story. Take off your clothes. I will apply the medicine. Zhuyue spoke in her distinctive neutral voice. Clad entirely in black robes, with a mask covering her face, she exuded an aura of mystery that made it impossible to discern her gender. Gu Junqing's eyes shifted. He slowly removed his clothes with an inexplicable air of demureness, like a bashful bride. Under her mask, Zhuyue's forehead twitched with a barely suppressed vein. Without another word, she stepped forward, stripped off Gu Junqing's upper garment, pushed him onto the bed, and flipped him over. Gu Junqing remained unusually cooperative throughout. He acted aggrieved and hesitant with exaggerated reluctance. Uncle Zhu, be gentle. Gu Junqing's voice sounded peculiar, almost like a coquettish whine. Zhuyue completely lost her composure. Between the two of us, who is the woman here? How disgusting. Is there a woman among us? Gu Junqing feigned confusion. No, what I meant was, stop fussing like a woman, all hesitant and dawdling. Lie down quickly so I can apply the medicine. Zhuyue calmed herself and hurriedly explained. All right. Gu Junqing stopped teasing her and obediently lay prone. Truth be told, even if his wounds healed quickly, using medicine to alleviate some pain was not a bad idea. However, I should tell you, this medicine is newly developed. I cannot guarantee there will not be any side effects. Zhuyue said this hesitantly. No problem, no problem. My physique recovers quickly. Use whatever you want. Gu Junqing replied nonchalantly. His own medical skill was even superior to Zhuyue's, a divine medical skill that ordinary people could scarcely attain. With just one whiff of the medicine, he had already identified its components. It could indeed treat the wounds from the tiger's claws, but it did have a minor side effect. It accelerated blood circulation. While this would speed up wound healing, it also risked reopening the injuries. Clearly, Zhuyue had not yet discovered this issue, so he could use it to his advantage. A glint of shrewdness flashed in Gu Junqing's eyes as he began scheming. Zhuyue applied the ointment and bandaged his wounds. During their occasional physical contact, Gu Junqing sighed inwardly. Su Chen is too foolish and naive. How could someone so fragrant and tender possibly be male? To be fair, it was not entirely Su Chen's fault. Since growing up, Su Chen had rarely had opportunities to get close to Zhuyue. She always maintained her distance. When teaching him, she would simply toss him a few books to study on his own, only answering questions if he had them. Thus, despite all these years, Su Chen had never been as physically close to Zhuyue as Gu Junqing was now. Opportunity favors the prepared. Since Su Chen does not know how to seize the moment, his master Gu Junqing will gladly take what is offered. After finishing the bandaging, Zhuyue instructed Gu Junqing not to turn over or move around, then left. Her face was flushed red again. She did not understand why being near Gu Junqing made her increasingly restless. She was growing curious about this man, wanting to learn more of his story. Had Gu Junqing known this, he would have been overjoyed. He understood well that when a woman becomes curious about a man, it often marks the beginning of affection. Returning to her room, Zhuyue sat in meditation to regulate her breathing and calm her emotions. Suddenly, she heard a scream from Gu Junqing's direction. This prompted her to rush to his room in alarm. What happened? What is wrong? In her panic, Zhuyue's voice slipped from its usual restraint. To Gu Junqing, her voice carried a bewitching allure within its delicacy, a blend of enchantment and charm. At first listen, it resembled an oriole emerging from a valley, as ethereal as an orchid in a deep ravine, yet also like babbling streams and willow branches caressed by the wind. It was softly murmuring, subtly seductive, and profoundly captivating. The first time he heard Zhuyue's voice, he knew she was disguising her natural tone, yet he had not expected it to be so melodious, leaving an endless aftertaste. Still, he had to pretend not to notice, careful not to reveal his awareness. Chapter 55. After her initial panic, Zhuyue realized she had accidentally used her natural voice. She paused briefly, carefully observing Gu Junqing's expression. Finding nothing out of the ordinary on his face, she relaxed. Switching back to her neutral voice, she asked, "Is something wrong?" Zhuyue coughed twice, attempting to play it off casually. Gu Junqing suppressed his laughter. "Nothing much. It is just that, for some reason, after applying the medicine, my back feels terribly itchy, and then suddenly there was a sharp pain. I feel like blood might be flowing out again." Gu Junqing endured the pain. Of course, there was no natural bleeding. Although this particular medicine had some side effects, they were not significant. Gu Junqing had deliberately accelerated his blood circulation through internal energy manipulation, forcibly reopening the wound. He wanted to make Zhuyue feel guilty for using him as a test subject. This way, he would secure a place in her heart, making her believe his condition worsened because of her, thus compelling her to take responsibility for his care. Upon hearing this, Zhuyue quickly turned Gu Junqing over and found the wound seeping blood. The previously white bandage was now stained with traces of fresh blood. Her expression changed as she murmured, "Impossible. Could it be that flying grass and heavy tower grass react and conflict when they meet? Or could it be that dragon mallow grass and snow sight grass are clashing because of skyview grass? It could not be. Even if there were side effects, it should not be like this." Zhuyue was puzzled. With her grandmaster-level medical skills, she could still confirm the efficacy of this herbal formula, especially since she had prepared it herself. This made her doubt her own medical expertise slightly. However, seeing Gu Junqing's condition, it was clear he was in considerable pain. She did not dwell on it further, unwrapping Gu Junqing's bandage to find some of the wounds on his back had begun to fester. She promptly cleaned the wounds for him. The pain from cleaning was so intense that it made Gu Junqing's lips twitch. Truth be told, Gu Junqing was quite ruthless toward himself, willing to harm himself just to evoke a sliver of guilt in Zhuyue. After finishing the treatment, Zhuyue cleaned Gu Junqing's wounds and rebandaged them. Seeing that the bleeding had stopped, she breathed a sigh of relief. "Tell me, what exactly did you do? Why did you bleed so much?" Zhuyue asked somewhat angrily. No matter how much she thought about it, she could not understand why the wound would suddenly reopen. Could it really be that her medicine was flawed? "I do not know." After applying the medicine, the wound felt numb and itchy, then suddenly there was a sharp pain. "I could not help but call for you." Gu Junqing pretended to sound wronged. Zhuyue looked at Gu Junqing's eyes with half suspicion. Gu Junqing helplessly met her gaze. Their eyes seemed to grow deeper the longer they looked at each other. Zhuyue even unconsciously etched Gu Junqing's entire face into her heart. She felt his eyes were so profound, as if they could draw her entire being in. Beneath her mask, her face grew increasingly flushed. This was the first time she had maintained such prolonged eye contact with a man. Gu Junqing even considered using his golden eyes to see through Zhuyue's mask clearly, but he felt he would rather save the surprise for when she voluntarily removed it for him to see. Staring into Zhuyue's eyes hidden beneath her mask, Gu Junqing felt as if he were gazing into a clear, shimmering pond, or a translucent gemstone sparkling with countless rays of light. Both could clearly see their own reflections in each other's pupils, stirring ripples in the depths of their hearts. This was Zhuyue's first time experiencing such emotions, her heart trembling uncontrollably. As for Gu Junqing, forget mere ripples. He had weathered storms and tempests in his endeavors. This was the difference between an experienced veteran and a novice. Defeated, Zhuyue turned her head away, secretly grateful that Gu Junqing could not see her flushed cheeks beneath the mask. Gu Junqing chuckled inwardly. When it came to thick-skinned audacity, he was far ahead of this woman, who was a decade his senior. "Ahem, if there is nothing else, I will take my leave now." Zhuyue coughed lightly and prepared to retreat, unable to withstand Gu Junqing's provocations. She had indeed become peculiar lately. Normally, she would not even spare men a glance, let alone blush from mere eye contact. She reckoned even if she saw a man completely naked, her expression would not flicker. Yet now, after just a few exchanged glances with Gu Junqing, her face burned crimson, and her heart raced uncontrollably. Perhaps it is because he is too handsome, she comforted herself inwardly. "But Uncle Zhu, what if the wound reopens?" Gu Junqing feigned urgency. "Wouldn't you call for me if it did?" Zhuyue replied helplessly. "But what if you cannot get here in time? I might bleed out and die." His pitiful act left Zhuyue at a loss. She found it hard to refuse some of his requests, especially since she felt somewhat guilty if it was truly due to the medicine's side effects. "How about I stay at your place, or you stay at mine? That would solve everything. If I have any issues, I can call for you directly, and you will not have to run back and forth." Gu Junqing's eyes lit up as if he had just thought of this brilliant idea. "No," Zhuyue exclaimed in shock. "Why not, Uncle Zhu? Do you have something to hide?" Gu Junqing widened his eyes, pretending innocence. "I said no, and that is final." "Ah, fine. It seems I am destined to be unloved. Let me bleed out and die then." Gu Junqing put on a resigned expression, gazing skyward with pitiful, puppy dog eyes. Truly, playing the dog was Gu Junqing's specialty. Whether as a simp or a helpless pup, he truly lived up to his name as that licking dog Gu Junqing. Zhuyue could not bear his pitiful act. She felt her conscience would torment her if she refused him again. After much deliberation, she sighed in resignation. "Fine. There is a small couch outside my quarters where you can rest, but you are not allowed into the inner courtyard. Also, once your injury heals, leave as soon as possible. Do not linger here." Gu Junqing's eyes sparkled, and he nodded eagerly. He currently had no dignity in front of Zhuyue. After all, with his current limitations, he could not reclaim his masculine pride. Thus, Gu Junqing followed Zhuyue back to her cottage. Zhuyue's cottage was divided into an inner room and an outer room, separated only by a single door. If Zhuyue wanted to go out, she had to pass through the outer room. Zhuyue walked into the inner room, then turned back to remind Gu Junqing. "Remember, do not come in no matter what. Do not take even one step closer, or you can just get lost." Gu Junqing, of course, agreed with a smile. Actually, being able to stay in Zhuyue's house today was already quite an achievement, even if it was only the outer area. Still, today's gains were substantial. At least he had made an impression on Zhuyue. As for whether it was a good or bad impression, it did not seem to matter all that much. Chapter 56. Gu Junqing lay leisurely on the small couch in the outer room, observing his surroundings. Antique wooden furnishings and a faint sandalwood aroma filled the space. Dappled sunlight filtered through the latticed carved windows. Upon closer inspection, he found himself lying on a soft wooden bed adorned with exquisite carvings that spoke of its extraordinary quality. Catching the scent from the quilt, Gu Junqing immediately knew Zhuyue had recently slept here. The delicate fragrance was identical to what he had noticed on her earlier. Raising an eyebrow, he thought this was an unexpected surprise. Lying prone on the bed, Gu Junqing noticed the sky outside the window gradually darkening. He intended to take out his phone to contact his subordinates outside, checking if Su Chen had made any moves, or if there were matters requiring his attention. Suddenly, Zhuyue's door opened. She glanced at Gu Junqing but, unwilling to engage with this scoundrel, walked out without a word. Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow, stood up, and followed her, curious about what she was doing outside at night. He saw Zhuyue pick up a nearby bucket and enter the kitchen. Following her inside, Gu Junqing found her boiling water, which puzzled him. "Uncle Zhu, what are you doing?" "Boiling water for a bath," Zhuyue replied expressionlessly and concisely. She had seen through this person. Hardly any of his words were truthful. The fact that he could still bounce around energetically proved everything. This scoundrel had insisted on staying in her house, Zhuyue thought with irritation. Gu Junqing was the type to take advantage of any opportunity. His eyes lit up. "Uncle Zhu, could I take a bath first? I was chased by a tiger today, and took a fall. I'm completely filthy, I must bathe." "Don't you know your wounds shouldn't come into contact with water?" It's fine. With you here, Uncle Zhu, you can wipe my body down. Just be careful when cleaning the wounds on my back," Gu Junqing said with a smile. Zhuyue looked at him with mixed emotions. She knew she shouldn't have engaged with him. "Wipe your sister's back." Even the usually calm and composed Zhuyue couldn't help but curse. "Uncle Zhu, my sister Qingzhou is no longer a child. Men and women should maintain proper boundaries. You can't wipe her back." Gu Junqing feigned seriousness, as if discussing something important. But who knew what was really on his mind? "Only I can wipe Qingzhou's back." A little version of Gu Junqing in his mind proudly placed his hands on his hips. Zhuyue composed herself and spoke in a somewhat resigned tone. "Your wounds really can't touch water right now. Can you wait until they've healed a bit before bathing?" "No way, Uncle Zhu. I'm so dirty I can't sleep. I, Gu Junqing, have few hobbies in life. I just love bathing. Besides, we're both men, so what's there to fear? Why not bathe together? I'll scrub your back, and you scrub mine." Gu Junqing no longer cared about maintaining his image. No one was around to see anyway. His sole focus now was teasing Zhuyue. However, Zhuyue, being older and wiser, knew that since she couldn't win the argument, there was only one way to make Gu Junqing give up on bathing. She walked over to the usual firewood area and began selecting a wooden stick. Gu Junqing couldn't tell whether Zhuyue agreed or not, so he quickly approached and asked, "Uncle Zhu, what are you doing? Picking firewood to boil water?" Zhuyue wore a stern expression, her voice devoid of any fluctuation. "No, I'm picking which stick will hurt you the most later. Look at this one, almost as thick as your thigh. If I hit you with it, your leg would probably break." "No, that would be too severe. And this one is too thin. It would probably only make your leg bleed. This one is just right, not too thick, not too thin. It should be more than enough to break all three of your legs." Gu Junqing stared blankly as Zhuyue picked out a stick to beat him with, muttering about the pros and cons of each. He was genuinely panicked now. Zhuyue was really going to hit him. There was no way he could defeat Zhuyue, even if he fought to the death. Helpless, he could only beg for mercy. "Uncle Zhu, I won't take a bath, really I won't. Who needs to bathe anyway?" Gu Junqing hates bathing more than anything in this life. "Uncle Zhu, farewell. Uncle Zhu, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Uncle Zhu, stay away from me." In the end, Gu Junqing walked out of the kitchen expressionless, another wound now on his thigh. Fortunately, Zhuyue had shown some mercy. The most important leg had nearly been hit, making Gu Junqing's heart tremble, let alone that crucial leg. But he would get his revenge. "Just you wait, Zhuyue. Gu Junqing never lets a grievance go unavenged." Limping, Gu Junqing made his way back to the outer room and sat cross-legged on the bed, pondering how to exact his revenge and in what position. Here, one could only say that although Gu Junqing looked pathetic when being beaten, the way he plotted his revenge was truly dashing. Not long after, while Gu Junqing was still thinking about revenge, he saw Zhuyue carrying 2 buckets of water into the inner room. Clearly, the inner room had an ancient-style bathtub. Gu Junqing could only watch expressionlessly as Zhuyue carried water in and empty buckets out. He was so envious. He wanted to soak in the bath too. Although Gu Junqing wasn't severely obsessive about cleanliness, running around all day and being chased by tigers had triggered his mild fastidiousness. It wasn't just about wanting Zhuyue to bathe him, though that was a big part of it. He genuinely wanted to clean up as well. Before entering the room for the last time, Zhuyue provocatively snorted at Gu Junqing. "Humph. If you dare come in, whether your third leg remains intact is anyone's guess." This remark ignited Gu Junqing's anger. "What, just because I don't go in means I can't see what's happening inside?" Gu Junqing grinned slyly. A moment later, timing it perfectly, Gu Junqing activated his golden eyes and peered inside. Ah, magnificent. Soon after, Gu Junqing deactivated his golden eyes. His previously expressionless face now carried a hint of lingering satisfaction. His thin lips curled upward, clearly having seen something he shouldn't have. Yet, we still don't know exactly what Gu Junqing saw. Half an hour later, Zhuyue emerged with the buckets and, seeing Gu Junqing sitting obediently cross-legged on the bed, nodded in satisfaction. Upon closer inspection, however, something seemed off about Gu Junqing. "Hey June, why is your nose bleeding?" "Really? Probably just some internal heat." Gu Junqing opened his eyes, calmly wiped his nose, and expressionlessly resumed his cross-legged position with closed eyes. He was desperately afraid of being found out. "But didn't you just suffer major blood loss today? How could you still get a nosebleed?" Zhuyue looked at Gu Junqing suspiciously, but didn't notice anything unusual. As for something like peeping, With Ji Zuyu's abilities, she could definitely detect any movement in Gu Junqing's room. If he had gotten out of bed or anything similar, she would have noticed long ago. Therefore, Ji Zuyu didn't consider that possibility at all. Chapter 57. Gu Junqing listened as Ji Zuyu walked out, and quickly let out a sigh of relief. The scene just now had indeed been quite stimulating, making his long-suppressed body feel somewhat feverish. But would he bleed to death? His back still burned with pain, oozing blood, and now his nose was bleeding too, Gu Junqing wondered inwardly. Fortunately, he had only caught a fleeting glimpse and had not stared for long. Otherwise, after suffering heavy blood loss today, Gu Junqing might not have been able to withstand it physically. Scratching his head, Gu Junqing sighed and lay down to sleep, hoping to recover some energy. When Ji Zuyu returned and saw Gu Junqing already fast asleep, she snorted and went into her room. The emotions she had experienced today surpassed what she usually felt in an entire year. Ji Zuyu let out a sharp huff of annoyance, humph. And this was going to continue for several more days. The thought alone made her feel slightly resentful. She whispered under her breath, "Stinky man, if you dare provoke me again, I will beat you to death." Her whisper, faint as a fly's buzz, echoed into Gu Junqing's room. The night fell into complete silence. The forest at night was the domain of animals, where the law of the jungle prevailed. The strong preyed on the weak, and the weak preyed on the weaker. Waves of beast roars echoed, and the once present sounds of wind and cicadas seemed to vanish without a trace. Only the occasional whimpers of animals drifted through the empty, blood-scented air, as if they were struggling for their last breaths, or crying out for help before death. But none of this had anything to do with Gu Junqing. He was sleeping quite comfortably at the moment. Only Ji Zuyu, in the inner room, with her keen hearing, could clearly make out the sound of Gu Junqing's breathing as he slept just outside her door. Accustomed to living alone, she found it difficult to fall asleep and tossed and turned restlessly. Left with no choice, she sat up and began to meditate. Early the next morning, Gu Junqing was awakened by an itching sensation on his back, likely a sign that his wounds were slowly healing. Ah, if I were not pretending to be injured to stay here, I would have healed long ago, Gu Junqing thought to himself. Whether through his medical skills or the healing medicines he had drawn from the system, both could quickly cure his injuries. Unfortunately, he had to play the pitiful card and leave those wounds as they were. As for whether scars would remain, Gu Junqing did not mind. Was there not a saying that scars were a man's medals? Of course, he could also remove the scars himself if he wanted. For the sake of his charm stats, Gu Junqing still planned to apply scar removal medicine after his wounds healed. Noticing no movement from the inner room, Gu Junqing assumed Ji Zuyu had not woken up yet, and decided to go outside to take a look. Yesterday, he had been solely focused on finding Ji Zuyu's location, and had not taken the time to carefully observe the terrain. Gu Junqing walked to a cliff edge and gazed into the distance. The vast green forest stretched like an ocean, one patch after another. The trees grew lush and verdant, exuding a comforting coolness. Sunlight filtered through the layers of leaves like golden threads, scattering across the grass. The meadow was dotted with countless wildflowers of all kinds, emitting an enticing fragrance from time to time. Birds in the forest fluttered and chirped joyfully, their melodies mingling with the murmuring of streams and lingering in the breeze. Everything seemed so full of vitality, lifting Gu Junqing's spirits. No wonder Ji Zuyu chose to live in seclusion here, though Gu Junqing had no such intentions himself. Right now, he only wanted to successfully win over Ji Zuyu, and then return to the city to deal with Su Chen. After watching for a while, Gu Junqing returned to Ji Zuyu's house. Seeing that Ji Zuyu had not risen yet, Gu Junqing voluntarily chopped some firewood and fetched water. Ji Zuyu finally awoke from deep slumber. Perhaps having grown accustomed to Gu Junqing's breathing, she managed to sleep for a while during the latter half of the night. Upon stepping outside, she was surprised to find Gu Junqing had already finished gathering the firewood and water. Her gaze softened slightly. Gu Junqing called out, "Uncle Zhu, you are awake. Shouldn't elderly people usually rise early? You are falling short here." Gu Junqing's words instantly hardened Ji Zuyu's recently softened demeanor, making her stern again. "Is your skin itching for a beating?" Ji Zuyu snapped angrily. Although she had permitted him to call her Uncle Zhu, being referred to as elderly struck a nerve. Did this fool not understand that fairies remain eternally 18? Unaware that he had touched a sore spot, Gu Junqing sighed helplessly. "Uncle Zhu, I have prepared some congee. You should have some." Seeing Gu Junqing being so considerate, Ji Zuyu's anger subsided. After all, Gu Junqing was injured yet still cooking, fetching water, and chopping wood. After finishing breakfast, Ji Zuyu began practicing martial arts nearby. She had maintained this routine for 10 years, but due to persistent internal injuries, her cultivation level remained stagnant, and was even gradually declining. Gu Junqing watched Ji Zuyu's movements with great interest, silently memorizing them. Though her cloak obscured her figure, there was no harm in memorizing the movements. Moreover, these motions seemed to embody profound martial principles, offering some benefit even to Gu Junqing in his current state. "Uncle Zhu, are you some kind of reclusive master?" Gu Junqing asked with a playful smile. "Not exactly. I just know some martial arts," Ji Zuyu replied after finishing her practice, taking a sip of water. "Then can you teach me? I want to learn." Gu Junqing's eyes sparkled. Ji Zuyu hesitated, considering Gu Junqing's injuries, but finally responded, "I can. But my school's ancestral rules require a formal apprenticeship to learn." Gu Junqing's eyes lit up, as he had been waiting for her to say exactly that. He had planned this from the start. His primary purpose in coming here was to apprentice under Zhuyue. This way, even if he and Su Chen ended up as rivals, they would be fellow disciples. While it might be considered fratricidal, Zhuyue would find it difficult to openly favor one over the other. Just an apprenticeship? No problem at all. I am definitely becoming your disciple, Junqing declared nonchalantly, stunning Zhuyue. Should modern people not be more reluctant to formally apprentice themselves? To her surprise, Junqing promptly prepared the apprenticeship rituals and formally became her disciple. Zhuyue was speechless. She never expected Junqing to act so efficiently, as she had thought he was joking. With no other choice, seeing that Junqing had genuinely prepared everything, she accepted him. Since that is the case, you are now my disciple. From now on, stop calling me Uncle Zhu. Address me as Master G. Master G, that sounds so weird, Junqing thought helplessly. Probably because he frequented massage parlors too often, where he only ever called technicians. I will just call you Master directly. That is more exciting. Or I mean, more respectful. Junqing quickly corrected himself, nearly slipping up. Fortunately, Zhuyue did not catch what he said, and allowed him to address her as he pleased. Junqing's eyes gleamed, as he had not expected the second step of his plan to be accomplished so effortlessly. By the way, you have an elder martial sister and an elder martial brother above you. I will introduce you to them another day. All right, master. Junqing smiled innocently, though his heart was filled with darkness. Indeed, the reason he came to become a disciple was to kill the Su Chen, and how could he not know him? Chapter 58. After Junqing and Zhuyue formally became master and disciple, they began living a rather uninhibited life. The bamboo whip cracked against the air. You made a mistake here, and here too, Zhuyue corrected, striking Junqing whenever he made an error in his movements. Junqing felt utterly defeated. He knew Zhuyue was surely taking this opportunity to get back at him. He had been copying her movements exactly while practicing martial arts. Zhuyue secretly delighted in the training. Serves you right, you rascal. Since you walked right into this yourself, I might as well teach you a proper lesson. However, the movements Zhuyue taught did have practical effects. They were external training techniques. Combined with Junqing's practice of the Yellow Emperor's inner cannon for internal cultivation, his martial prowess improved rapidly over the past few days. Although the combat power he relied on did not come from cultivation, every bit of improvement increased his chances of future success. After several training sessions, Junqing gradually got the hang of it. He could feel his body absorbing some kind of energy, gradually growing stronger. Zhuyue was somewhat astonished. She had never seen anyone cultivate this quickly. Even her most talented disciple, Su Chen, was far behind. This made her somewhat suspicious. She began to doubt Junqing's story about being a tourist who came to the mountain for leisure, accidentally encountering a tiger, and stumbling upon this place by chance. So she probed further. Junqing, how did you end up coming into the mountains? Master, I am the young master of a minor family in Luodu, the Gu family. I usually enjoy extreme sports, so I came to the mountains alone for adventure. I just did not expect to run into a tiger. Luckily, I met you, master, and you saved me. Junqing's eyes flickered slightly, carrying a hint of admiration and reverence. This look pleased Zhuyue. When Junqing first arrived, he had been somewhat insolent in front of her, even asking her to scrub his back. Now seeing him look at her with such respect filled her with satisfaction. She did not even bother questioning the minor inconsistencies in his story. Moreover, Junqing was only 18, the same age as her other disciple, Su Chen. At that age, she reasoned, he probably would not lie, so she let the matter drop. All right, Junqing, come over. I will now explain some basics of martial arts to you. That is enough practice for today. Zhuyue patted the table, signaling for Junqing to sit opposite her. Yes, master. Junqing sat down, pretending to be obedient. He was not clear about some fundamental martial arts concepts. This was the real world, not some vaguely described novel. Moreover, this world was a fusion of countless stories. His current understanding of strength rankings was based on the combat power system from the Great Villain system. As for cultivation realms, he had little knowledge at this point. Even if the Gu family knew, he had originally been nothing more than a spoiled young master. Since he had only recently begun to access the Gu family's true power, his understanding remained limited. Current martial arts realms are divided into 1st rank to 9th rank. The hierarchy of strength from top to bottom is very strict. Your current strength is already close to 1st rank. That is truly impressive. Zhuyue looked at Junqing with admiration. Junqing was indeed the most talented student she had ever taught, having nearly reached the 1st rank after such a short period of cultivation. Junqing's eyes flickered thoughtfully. He had begun to understand the distinctions between cultivation realms and combat power. He had concealed his combat power to around 100, which in Zhuyue's eyes meant he was close to the 1st rank. As for Zhuyue, she claimed her own strength was at the Grandmaster level, but when he used his inside eye to check, her combat power was actually just over 500. So that meant the 1st rank corresponded to around 100 combat power in the system. The 2nd rank would be equivalent to 200 combat power in the system, and so on. However, even though it seemed like only an increase of 100 combat power, it represented an all-around improvement in every attribute. When someone's attributes were several times higher than yours, the gap became obvious. For example, when Junqing's combat power exceeded 100, defeating Lin Tian, whose power was around 50, was as easy as turning his hand. Lin Tian had no chance to fight back. And when Junqing's combat power broke 200, defeating his former self at 100 was effortless. It is almost impossible for someone of a lower rank to defeat someone of a higher rank, but there are a few exceptional talents who can do it. For example, your master here, though currently at the Grandmaster realm, could still easily take on a 6th rank practitioner. As she said this, Zhuyue puffed out her chest slightly. Even with her face hidden behind a mask, Gu Junqing could sense her pride. Gu Junqing felt speechless. Before you were injured, your strength reached the 7th rank. Now, even if you can take on a 6th rank, what is there to boast about? He kept his thoughts to himself, as he could not reveal anything at this point. Still, it truly was difficult for someone with lower combat power to defeat someone with higher combat power. It was like a certain MOBA game. If your equipment was several items behind and your level was lower by several stages, defeating your opponent was nearly impossible. Unless your skills were exceptional, like a professional player versus a bronze tier player, you might turn the tables with superior gameplay. But even then, victory was hard to achieve. Wow, master, you are amazing. Gu Junqing looked at Zhuyue with an expression full of admiration. This made Zhuyue puff out her chest even more, basking in her disciples' worship. Gu Junqing felt a little regretful. If only that cloak were not blocking the view, he might have enjoyed a more breathtaking sight. Then, master, what comes after the 9th rank? Gu Junqing asked with a curious expression. Beyond the 9th rank, even I have not heard of it. It is not called Grandmaster. A hint of longing appeared in Zhuyue's eyes, but she soon grew dejected, as the hidden injuries in her body made it difficult for her strength to improve further. In fact, her power had been slowly declining, falling from the early Transcendent realm to the Grandmaster realm. Nevertheless, she quickly cheered up. She believed she would find a way to heal her injuries, restore her strength, and even advance further. Alright, you have not even reached the 1st rank yet. Why ask about what is beyond the 9th rank? Even your senior brother, in a letter a few days ago, said he had only just reached the 2nd rank. Don't aim too high. Gu Junqing's eyes gleamed. Oh, master, did not senior brother leave the mountain? How is he still in contact with you? Zhuyue rapped Gu Junqing on the head. Do you think your master is some ancient relic, who does not know how to write letters or make phone calls? Oh, then what else did senior brother say in his letter? Gu Junqing feigned confusion, desperate to know if Su Chen had mentioned anything. He said he reached the 2nd rank and then stopped talking. He also mentioned offending some young master from a certain family, and might need my help, and that was it. Zhuyue sounded indifferent. With the connections she had built in her youth, ordinary families posed no threat to her. It was merely a matter of a single word. Chapter 59. Oh right, don't I have another senior sister? Where is she? Gu Junqing noticed that Su Chen even wanted to ask Zhuyue to come down the mountain to deal with him, and a flicker of amusement passed through his eyes. It seemed Su Chen truly had no way to handle him now. Why are you asking so many questions? When the time comes, you will naturally know. Zhuyue looked at Gu Junqing warily, feeling he had been unusually inquisitive today. Alright, I won't ask any more. Gu Junqing looked somewhat helplessly at his master, Zhuyue, who appeared impatient and unwilling to answer him. Zhuyue herself didn't understand why she felt inexplicably irritated when Gu Junqing asked about other women, even if it was just about his own senior sister and her disciple. Eventually, she attributed it to Gu Junqing being problematic, as he usually appeared rather frivolous and, coming from a wealthy family, possibly fond of playing with women. So by not disclosing information about her female disciple, she believed she was protecting her. With this reasoning, Zhuyue felt much better. She no longer dwelled on the faint sourness she had felt earlier. Enough now, let's continue martial arts practice. Zhuyue stood up, picked up the bamboo whip beside her, and swung it through the air. The whip cut through the air with a sharp whistling sound. The sound made Gu Junqing's legs ache faintly, as he had been struck many times by Zhuyue during their training sessions these past few days. It was almost enough to shatter his carefully maintained persona. Fortunately, no one else had witnessed these moments, though the daily interactions between them would eventually become sweet memories in both their hearts. Evening. Master, I really need to bathe now. Could you help me wash just once? Gu Junqing was determined not to give up until Zhuyue agreed to help him bathe. He truly couldn't bear it any longer. Although the wounds on his back were gradually healing, they still couldn't come into contact with water to avoid infection. Meanwhile, Gu Junqing had been training outdoors these past couple of days. The weather hadn't completely cooled yet, so he ended up drenched in sweat every day from practice. Therefore, he was adamant this time about having Zhuyue help him wash. Zhuyue, too, was growing weary of his persistence and finally relented. After all, in Gu Junqing's eyes, she was still presenting as male, so Zhuyue thought wiping down his body wouldn't be inappropriate. Of course, she didn't know that Gu Junqing had long been aware of her true gender. Seeing his request succeed, a sly glint flashed in Gu Junqing's eyes. Immediately, without waiting for Zhuyue's instruction, he proactively began heating water and carrying buckets back and forth. His initiative surprised Zhuyue. Normally, when asked to do anything, Gu Junqing would either dawdle or demand some benefit in return. His unusual eagerness now made Zhuyue somewhat suspicious, but she attributed it to him having gone too long without bathing and didn't think much of it. The possibility of her true identity being exposed never crossed her mind, as Su Chen had followed her for years without discovering she was female, let alone Gu Junqing, who had only been with her for a few days. What she didn't know was that even if Gu Junqing hadn't known beforehand, these past few days, whether from Zhuyue's occasionally revealing voice, her alluring fragrance, or her occasionally visible figure and waistline, would have been enough for Gu Junqing, with his extensive experience with women, to deduce that Zhuyue was indeed female. Zhuyue still thought she was well concealed, but in reality, it was only because Su Chen had little experience with women. Combined with Zhuyue's exceptional martial arts skills, Su Chen had firmly concluded that beneath the mask and cloak was an older uncle. Gu Junqing diligently arranged everything and then sat down in the courtyard. Master, could you help me take off my clothes? Do you not have hands of your own, that you need your master to undress you? Zhuyue said angrily. I can't see my back, can I? I'm afraid of touching the wounds. Gu Junqing pretended to look very wronged. Zhuyue took a deep breath and had no choice but to slowly pull off Gu Junqing's clothes. Looking at the 3 scars, Zhuyue felt inexplicably angry, partly angry that Gu Junqing didn't take good care of himself, and partly angry at that stupid tiger. Sighing, she completely removed the upper garments from Gu Junqing's body. After these past few days of interaction, she had grown quite fond of Gu Junqing as her disciple. Although he was quite annoying, always bothering her with everything, he would also tell jokes and do things to please her, frequently checking whether she needed to eat or drink something. Compared to that blockhead Su Chen, Gu Junqing was indeed more than twice as good, which made Zhuyue feel more affection for him. Moreover, her impression of Gu Junqing had already become extremely favorable under the influence of the female lead charm aura. This was Gu Junqing choosing the right way to win over Zhuyue. Zhuyue had lived in seclusion alone for many years, so her impressions of others were generally faint. One could summarize it with the phrase innately indifferent. If Gu Junqing kept troubling Zhuyue, it would continuously deepen her impression of him, making her feel needed and valued by him. This might make it impossible for Zhuyue to ever forget him. In daily life, the usual way we interact with others to foster friendship is by exchanging small gifts or treating each other to meals to enhance mutual affection. Sometimes, actually troubling others is the best kind of relationship between friends. Gu Junqing was well versed in this. For a detached woman like Zhuyue, relentless monetary pursuits or emotional appeals were completely useless, as she would only grow to dislike you. If Zhuyue truly craved worldly luxuries, with her abilities she could be an honored guest anywhere, not to mention her extraordinary medical skills. Zhuyue looked at Gu Junqing's broad shoulders and thought, although he's still young, he really seems to have grown into a man. After this thought, she blushed. Zhuyue, what are you thinking? He's your disciple. Master, hurry up and wipe it, master. I can't wait any longer. Gu Junqing spoke with an innocent and pure expression. This made Zhuyue somewhat embarrassed and annoyed. Although she had never done such things, she wasn't completely ignorant, as Gu Junqing's words carried obvious double meanings. But considering that Gu Junqing was still young and might not understand such implications, she forgave him. What Zhuyue didn't know was that Gu Junqing had already driven countless innuendo-filled conversations. This scoundrel was doing it on purpose. Zhuyue picked up the cloth and began wiping Gu Junqing's back. Gu Junqing felt as if a small hand were gently stroking his back, making him itch all over. Zhuyue's small hands moved gently across his back. Beneath the mask, her face was flushed crimson, and she felt warmth spreading through her body. She didn't understand why she felt this way. After all, this was her disciple. When facing Su Chen, she had always been composed and unflustered. At most, she would show concern for his daily life, or ask whether he needed anything. Su Chen would usually say he needed nothing, which made her feel quite pleased, thinking he had truly grown up, so she allowed him to descend the mountain to get married. But that scoundrel Gu Junqing bothered her with everything, called for her constantly, and even deliberately made her hit him with the bamboo whip. She knew Gu Junqing had long mastered those movements, yet he intentionally made mistakes just so she would hit him more and teach him longer. And in this process, Zhuyue found Gu Junqing's figure becoming increasingly etched into her heart. Chapter 60. Zhuyue had never bathed Su Chen. He was around 8 or 9 years old when she found him. By that time, he was already quite grown, so Zhuyue's care for Su Chen was limited to ensuring he did not starve, teaching him, and managing his daily life, nothing more. But now, Gu Junqing was already 18, and Zhuyue was actually wiping his back, a situation that was rather stimulating for both of them. After finishing, Zhuyue prepared to leave. Master, should I take off my pants too? Gu Junqing said, his tone barely suppressing laughter. Gu Junqing, do you have a death wish? Her icy words sent a chill down Gu Junqing's spine. He quickly insisted he did not dare. Zhuyue snorted, picked up the bucket, and headed to fetch water for her own bath. Her face was flushed red. Wiping Gu Junqing's back had put her under some pressure, making her sweat slightly. Gu Junqing's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly said, Master, I would like to bathe in the tub too. Why do we not bathe together? It would be a good chance for us, master and disciple, to communicate. Sure. Let us have a good talk, master and disciple. Zhuyue gritted her teeth. She realized Gu Junqing really knew how to push his luck. If she did not teach him a harsh lesson this time, she would be failing as a master. Seeing the situation turn sour, Gu Junqing quickly backed away. Master, never mind, I will bathe by myself. Zhuyue let out a sound that sent shivers down his spine. Gu Junqing retreated further, noticing that she had even picked up a stick as thick as his thigh from nearby. Master, are you serious? I will not dare anymore, really. Watching Zhuyue slowly approach, Gu Junqing felt a wave of despair. He even wondered how he would explain it to others if his legs were broken. But then it occurred to him that his master was, after all, a woman, and women had one particular weakness, shyness. Master, if you come any closer, I will use my ultimate move. I will not even care about shame. Oh, what ultimate move? Zhuyue asked curiously, stepping closer. She was not afraid of any ultimate move. With his level of martial arts, she could beat him even with both hands tied. Gu Junqing wore an expression of grim determination. He undid his belt, and his pants dropped instantly. For a moment, silence hung heavily between them. Zhuyue froze in place, staring at a certain spot, before her entire body suddenly flushed bright red. Ah, she exclaimed, even forgetting to disguise her voice in her shock. She hurled the stick toward Gu Junqing, then turned and fled. It was the first time she had seen such a thing. Seeing the thick stick flying toward him, Gu Junqing twisted his hips in panic. Thud. The stick embedded itself deep into the nearby wall. Gu Junqing broke out in a cold sweat. He had not realized Zhuyue's casual throw in her flustered state would carry such force. He had almost been rendered unable to have heirs. He decided it would be best not to provoke Zhuyue anymore. He was genuinely afraid the Gu family might end up without an heir. After calming down, Gu Junqing quickly cleaned up the mess on the floor and returned to Su Chen's room. He felt it was better not to show himself around Zhuyue for a while. Who knew if she might get agitated and throw something like that again? Meanwhile, Zhuyue lay on her bed, buried under the blankets, utterly speechless. She did not know why she had reacted so strongly. This feeling made her heart race uncontrollably, yet when she thought of Gu Junqing's smug expression, she felt infuriated all over again. Gu Junqing, she wanted to kill him right now. But why did Gu Junqing come up with such a shameless trick to avoid being beaten by me? Zhuyue wondered in confusion. Could it be because he knows I am a woman? Impossible. My acting is so good, even that brat Su Chen has not figured it out in 10 years. With these doubts swirling in her mind, Zhuyue went to bed with a flushed face. She felt she needed a good night's sleep to completely erase the image she could not forget from her mind. She even felt unclean. Meanwhile, Gu Junqing could only gaze at the bright moon, contemplating what punishment awaited him tomorrow. It is all because I acted impulsively. That situation was worse than being beaten. Will I even survive tomorrow? Gu Junqing thought gloomily. Perhaps he should not have teased Zhuyue's heart so boldly. He had ended up taking it too far. Early the next morning, Gu Junqing cleaned every inch of Zhuyue's quarters spotlessly to atone for his sins. He hoped this would lessen his punishment. But Zhuyue was not going to let him off so easily this time. When she heard Gu Junqing enter the outer room to pay his respects, Zhuyue grabbed her bamboo whip and strode out. Without a word, she lashed Gu Junqing's left leg, leaving him utterly bewildered. After striking him, Zhuyue said nonchalantly, "That was for stepping in with your left foot first. Remember to use your right foot next time." Gu Junqing stared in disbelief. "Master, you were not even out here. How did you know I used my left foot?" "I heard it, but I used my right foot." "Oh, then I misheard." With that, Zhuyue whipped his right foot. "Remember to use your left foot next time." After being struck twice, Gu Junqing felt speechless. So Zhuyue was just looking for excuses to whip him. He had no choice but to accept it. After all, he was the one who had acted shamelessly first. "Come on, follow me outside for training." After saying this, Zhuyue walked out the door and glanced back to see how Gu Junqing would exit. Gu Junqing froze. He was certain Zhuyue would whip whichever foot he stepped out with. So he pressed his legs together and hopped out the door. Zhuyue nodded approvingly, then promptly delivered 2 more lashes, 1 for each foot. Gu Junqing felt like crying. "How dare you hop out the door?" Then Zhuyue leisurely walked out into the courtyard. She watched to see how Gu Junqing would follow. Trailing behind her, Gu Junqing was at a loss again. All he wanted now was to kneel before Zhuyue and admit his wrongdoing. Gu Junqing bowed his head. "Master, I was wrong." "About what?" "About taking a bath." "No." She whipped him as she answered. "Then about taking off my pants." "No." Another lash struck him. "I do not understand then," Gu Junqing said, on the verge of tears. "You were wrong for dirtying your master's eyes." With that, she landed 2 more swift lashes. Gu Junqing resigned himself. "Fine, whatever you say." Still, although Zhuyue kept whipping him, she was not using much force. It seemed she had already forgiven him in her heart. This realization eased Gu Junqing's worries. Letting Zhuyue vent her anger was probably for the best. However, what Gu Junqing did not expect was how immensely pleasurable Zhuyue found it at that moment. She thought whipping Gu Junqing felt incredibly satisfying, perhaps because he was simply too despicable. This would become one of Gu Junqing's deepest regrets in the future. He had unwittingly cultivated a peculiar preference in Zhuyue through the whipping, which would later cause him considerable suffering. Chapter 61. Gu Junqing had been depressed all day, his body covered in welts from Zhuyue's bamboo cane. However, she had shown some restraint by avoiding his existing wounds. Moreover, Gu Junqing noticed that the more Zhuyue struck him, the more evident the pleasure on her face became. In his mind, Gu Junqing imagined Zhuyue as a queen holding a small whip and wearing high heels. The resemblance was uncanny. His heart sank. Had he accidentally awakened some strange fetish in her? After hesitating for a moment, he asked, "Master, have you calmed down?" Zhuyue smiled. "Was I ever angry?" Gu Junqing fell silent. It seemed she had not cooled off yet. He sighed as he watched Zhuyue, who was still eagerly looking for any mistake he might make. Here he was, a young master from a wealthy family, risking life and limb for his own safety. After all, he who fears not being torn to pieces dares to unhorse the emperor. But to ensure that Zhuyue would side with him, or at least remain neutral, in his future conflict with Su Chen, he had to prevent her from joining Su Chen's camp at all costs. Suddenly, he recalled the original plot. His eyes lit up. Today was October 21st, and if he remembered correctly, tomorrow was Zhuyue's birthday. This was his chance to leave a deeper impression on her. Not that his current impression wasn't already deep enough. Seeing Junqing daring to space out in front of her, Zhuyue tapped his head with her small bamboo whip. At that moment, she looked more and more like the whip-wielding queen he had imagined. Junqing shook his head, trying to dismiss the terrifying thought. Wrong here, and here too. Zhuyue corrected him, and Junqing studied diligently. From a distance, it looked like a scene of a kind master and a devoted disciple. And in a way it was. Hit, hit, hit. So satisfying. Serves you right for showing me those dirty things. Zhuyue thought to herself, feeling increasingly exhilarated with each strike, as if she had awakened something within. As night fell, the forest once again became a stage for the survival of the fittest. Around Zhuyue's courtyard, however, the repellent powder she had scattered, and the brightly lit surroundings kept any wild beasts at bay. Besides, in terms of combat prowess, neither Junqing nor Zhuyue had anything to fear from wild animals. Junqing returned to Su Chen's house, still too afraid to sleep in Zhuyue's quarters that night. He picked up his phone to check on Su Chen's situation. His subordinate reported that Su Chen had started venturing out occasionally. Junqing narrowed his eyes. It was time to speed up his efforts to win over Zhuyue. He immediately instructed Baldi and Qiju to prepare fireworks for him. Fireworks might be a cliché, but for someone like Zhuyue, who, though not old, yearned for care and affection, they were the most effective way to create a romantic atmosphere. He had Baldi and Qiju gather nearly half the fireworks in Lotus City. He was planning something grand. The next day, Junqing woke up early and cooked a bowl of longevity noodles for Zhuyue. This surprised Zhuyue, who had just gotten up to see what was going on. She looked at him with a slightly puzzled expression. How did you know today is my birthday? I found a diary in Su Chen's room. He wrote that he had always regretted never celebrating your birthday with you. Junqing said this with a beaming smile. He wanted to stir up some trouble for Su Chen. However, Zhuyue didn't take it to heart. You're very thoughtful, Zhuyue said, pretending to sound mature and speaking in a gratified tone. Then she finished every last bit of the noodles Junqing had cooked. Ding. Female lead Zhuyue's favorability toward the host has increased by +5, now at 40. Villain points have increased by 2,000. Junqing hadn't expected that simply cooking a bowl of longevity noodles for Zhuyue and remembering her birthday would move her so deeply. I'll give you the day off today. Zhuyue waved her hand grandly. She was overjoyed and touched that someone remembered her. She had now forgiven Junqing for his indecent behavior the day before. Usually accustomed to a quiet life alone, she suddenly found someone barging forcefully into her world, like a clear, tranquil lake struck by a massive rock, not only causing ripples, but even stirring up turbulent waves. Junqing agreed cheerfully with a smile. Meanwhile, Su Chen also wanted to call his master to wish her well. Although he hadn't gotten Zhuyue a gift, it was, after all, her birthday, so basic greetings and concern were still necessary. Just then, the sound of a car braking echoed outside Su Chen's house. Someone called out to him. The visitor was Li Zixiu. She had received a call from Junqing yesterday, instructing her to take Su Chen away early this morning and prevent him from accessing any communication tools. This left Li Zixiu somewhat puzzled, but by now she had genuinely started to develop feelings for Junqing. Moreover, Junqing's previous act of making Su Chen suffer public humiliation had already proven something, so she believed Junqing must be plotting something again, or had some scheme in mind. In any case, Junqing was helping her break free from Su Chen. Without a second thought, she went to her father, Li Xiao, and discussed the matter with him. She said she would only consider the marriage if Su Chen took on the role of general manager at a nearly bankrupt cosmetics company owned by the Li family and managed to revive it, making it the industry leader. She insisted that Su Chen be sent directly to the company for training. Of course, the Li family was not allowed to assist him. In Li Zixiu's view, this was an almost impossible task. First, the company was on the verge of collapse, and Su Chen was only a high school senior. How could he possibly turn around such a large company? Second, even if he managed to stabilize it, becoming the industry leader would be extremely difficult. And if all else failed, she could always ask Junqing to step in. Crushing a company would be a piece of cake for him. Li Zixiu's father, Li Xiao, was overjoyed. The very next morning, he sent someone to bring Su Chen over, planning to train him thoroughly. He believed achieving this goal would be effortless. Even if he couldn't help openly, he could still secretly arrange for some companies to assist Su Chen. In the original storyline, there was a similar episode. After all, Su Chen was a divine doctor who had descended from the mountains. He had more than one prescription for beauty and whitening. This company position seemed tailor-made for him. In the original story, Li Zixiu had also thought of this method, but Su Chen managed to turn the tables repeatedly, eventually leading her to acknowledge the marriage arrangement. As she spent more time with Su Chen, she gradually grew fond of him and fell for him. This time, the plot had already undergone significant changes. Su Chen still embarked on the path of starting with a cosmetics company, and Li Zixiu still gambled with her marriage engagement. This left Junqing, who had heard Li Zixiu explain this method yesterday, somewhat helpless. he could only admit that the power of plot correction was truly formidable. Chapter 62. Gu Junqing did not say much last night, because as long as Su Chen's position in Zhuyue's heart was not important, Su Chen could not escape his grasp. Zhuyue was the most crucial factor, so he only needed to ensure that Su Chen could not contact her recently. Let him focus on his pursuits. As for Su Chen starting a company, if it could still be established in Luodu under the Gu family's suppression, then the Gu family might as well collapse sooner. Moreover, if Su Chen eventually discovered that everyone in his company, from top to bottom, except himself, were all Gu Junqing's people, what would he think? A glint of wickedness flashed in Gu Junqing's eyes. He had already paved the way for Su Chen's rise, but it was all just to make a bridal gown for someone else, for Gu Junqing himself. Naturally, the most urgent matter now was Zhuyue. As long as she did not rely on her vast connections and formidable martial prowess to help Su Chen, then Su Chen was practically a fish on the chopping block. For Zhuyue, he did not just want her heart, he wanted her body as well. He always adhered to one principle: actions must be practical. He only believed in love that grew over time. Any affection that did not develop through prolonged interaction, he did not quite trust. Right now, he had a project worth several hundred million that he was eager to discuss with Zhuyue. He could not wait. The more he thought about it, the more wicked his thoughts became. Fortunately, Gu Junqing stopped himself in time and began planning his next steps. For instance, this time, even though the plot had changed so drastically, Su Chen still ended up as the general manager of a cosmetics company. It seemed there was some kind of plot correction at play. If the general direction did not change much, then Gu Junqing would have even more room to maneuver, enough to scheme Su Chen to his death step by step. Gu Junqing wore a smile on his face, but his mind was filled with all sorts of covert schemes. Even from a distant mountain, Gu Junqing could remotely control everything in Luodu. However, while he was busy scheming against Su Chen, he seemed to have forgotten many things. For example, Nirong Wan and Luo Ningyu were currently grinding their teeth in frustration because Gu Junqing had been gone for so many days without even a single phone call. For example, Lin Qingzhou had decided that when Gu Junqing returned, she would cling to him like a sloth and refuse to let go. And then there was Yu Miajin, who felt she might as well drain Gu Junqing dry. It had been so many days since she last saw him. Didn't he know she was already in her 20s, nearly 30? Hadn't he heard that 30 was the age of the tigress and wolf? Gu Junqing yawned, feeling as if someone was cursing him. He did not pay it much mind, simply attributing it to Su Chen. After thinking it over, he went back to his tasks with a clear conscience, though he could not shake the faint feeling that he had forgotten something. After arranging the evening fireworks display, Gu Junqing went back to find Zhuyue. He found her lying on a rocking chair, swaying back and forth like an old man, basking in the sun with a tea set beside her. Yet she was still dressed in her mask and black robe. Gu Junqing's lips twitched. Didn't she feel hot? Didn't she know black absorbed heat? Over the past few days, he had discovered that Zhuyue was not just a homebody. She was also extremely lazy. If she could sit, she would not stand. If she could lie down, she would not slump. The only time she was proactive was when she practiced martial arts. Gu Junqing felt helpless, since he did not need to practice martial arts right now anyway, and it would not be very useful even if he did, as his combat power mainly relied on the system. He might as well get closer to Zhuyue. Master, how about we continue our unfinished discussion about 4 joy meatballs from last time? Gu Junqing walked over with a smile and sat down beside Zhuyue. Yes, that was right. Zhuyue was not just lazy, she was also a foodie. Over the past few days, Gu Junqing and Zhuyue's interactions had basically alternated between martial arts training and discussing ingredients, then more training and more discussions about food. Gu Junqing had already learned about some of Zhuyue's little habits from the book, so he had specifically memorized many cooking methods before coming. This initially made Zhuyue very happy, as the dishes she prepared following Gu Junqing's methods indeed tasted quite different yet equally delicious. Even the advanced culinary skills Gu Junqing had drawn from the lottery made Zhuyue's eyes shine with delight while eating, so these days, it was almost always Gu Junqing who cooked. The reason Zhuyue tolerated some of Gu Junqing's minor liberties was closely related to all this. If Su Chen had tried to tease Zhuyue relying solely on their master-disciple relationship repeatedly, he would likely have been crippled by her long ago. Yet Gu Junqing not only navigated the situation with ease, but even when Zhuyue saw his big treasure, she only gave him a warning without further punishment. To capture a woman's heart, one could also start by capturing her stomach. This was part of Gu Junqing's careful calculation, whether it was initially using the female lead charm or to make Zhuyue feel attracted, getting slightly injured by a tiger to trigger her compassion, or her current tolerance toward him. Gu Junqing had planned it all from the start. He wanted Zhuyue to gradually grow accustomed to him, to his presence and all his actions toward her. Habit could be a terrifying thing, subtly reshaping one's thoughts over time. Gu Junqing's initial plan was to start with teasing words to make her shy, then slowly progress to physical contact, and finally reveal his big treasure. Of course, the difficulty of this was evident. Moreover, to be cautious, Gu Junqing chose to begin with the slower progressing master-disciple relationship. This was not just due to his personal preference for such dynamics, but also because if Zhuyue was unwilling to accept him, they would still have the bond of master and disciple. As long as that relationship existed, Gu Junqing would essentially be in an unbeatable position, roughly on equal footing with Su Chen. To achieve victory, one must first consider failure. Of course, Gu Junqing always planned before acting, so even if failure was possible, it was minimal. And if he did fail, he had contingency plans to minimize his losses. When Zhuyue heard Gu Junqing was about to talk about food again, her eyes lit up. Usually lazy, she even sat up straight to listen to Gu Junqing describe the methods, ingredients, and flavors of the dishes, vividly imagining them. In this life, she had only 2 major hobbies, eating and practicing martial arts. If sleeping counted, it would be 3. Gu Junqing deliberately used his eloquence to make Zhuyue's mouth water. This was the only matter she took so seriously. So indeed, Gu Junqing's ability to grasp people's hearts was simply too masterful. Especially when it came to handling women, Gu Junqing could only describe himself with one phrase: nothing special, just practice makes perfect. After Gu Junqing finished speaking, Zhuyue pushed him and urged him into the kitchen. She wanted to taste the dishes Gu Junqing had mentioned for dinner. What was wrong with a master asking her disciple to do something? Besides, she was practically the birthday girl today. Zhuyue thought this with complete justification. Chapter 63. Gu Junqing meticulously prepared the ingredients he had readied earlier. His advanced culinary skills made the elegant young master a delight to watch while cooking. The dishes he created were not only visually stunning, with breathtaking food carvings, but also offered flavors that left people in awe. This was how he planned to capture Zhuyue's heart through her stomach, making her gradually dependent on him. He had already arranged most of the evening's events. Now it was just a matter of whether Zhuyue would be moved. Truth be told, Gu Junqing had initially considered using forceful methods on Zhuyue. After all, following the logic of affection growing over time, there was a chance the female lead might develop feelings. He later realized that Zhuyue's combat prowess far surpassed his current abilities, so he abandoned this immature idea and decided to win her over through patience and time. As for the classic hero saving the beauty trope, Gu Junqing could only scoff. If anything, it was more likely to be beauty saving the hero. After preparing the ingredients, Gu Junqing brought out several dishes at once. Zhuyue, who had been waiting eagerly, was overjoyed, losing her usual composure. Her impatient demeanor even made Gu Junqing, who was accustomed to her antics, sigh in amusement. What a true foodie. Zhuyue's eyes lit up after just one bite. Not bad, today's dishes are even more delicious. She never held back praise when it came to food, especially since her own culinary skills paled in comparison to Gu Junqing's. Of course, who knows, I might have a big night ahead, gotta replenish my energy properly. Gu Junqing's words seemed to carry a hidden meaning, leaving Zhuyue, immersed in her culinary bliss, utterly confused. What are you planning? A fight? She did not dwell on it, perhaps because eating was her top priority at the moment. Without waiting for his reply, she filled a large bowl with soup, took a sip, and ended up drinking it all. Gu Junqing didn't answer aloud but silently thought, you of course. After the meal, Zhuyue was so full she slumped into her chair, rubbing her rounded belly. Even her thick cloak couldn't conceal its fullness. Gu Junqing watched her with a smile. As a chef, seeing someone enjoy his dishes brought him a sense of accomplishment, though perhaps not as thrilling as betraying the master and destroying the ancestors. All right, master, rest for a bit. Let's go see the next gift I've prepared for you. Zhuyue was taken aback. It was the first time anyone had made such a fuss over her birthday. Her eldest disciples, Chen Lingyu and Su Chen, had occasionally cooked for her, but never anything beyond that. She never expected Gu Junqing, who had only recently become her disciple, to go to such lengths. Touched, she felt her heart beat a little faster, and a blush spread across her cheeks. She dismissed it as mere pride in having such a thoughtful disciple, unaware of the faint emotions stirring within her. She dared not explore them further, fearing they might lead her into an abyss she wasn't ready to face. Gu Junqing led Zhuyue toward the mountain peak. He had instructed his subordinates to set off all the fireworks at midnight, a spectacle he estimated would be visible across much of Luodu, creating an unforgettable scene. Gu Junqing had already set up a table and seating on the mountaintop, chatting with Zhuyue as they waited together for the fireworks to rise. Disciple, today your master is deeply moved. This is the first time someone has treated me this way. Zhuyue spoke with undeniable emotion. Even Chen Lingyu had never been as attentive as Gu Junqing, let alone that brat Su Chen. Then will master still hit me? Of course. Don't think just because of this your master has completely forgotten how you acted like a rogue toward me. Master, when a man acts that way toward a woman, it's called being a rogue. But how can it be called rogue behavior when it's between men? Hey you, Zhuyue hesitated for a moment. Do you know something? I don't know anything. Gu Junqing replied with a beaming smile. It was precisely this appearance, seeming to know everything while appearing to know nothing, that was most infuriating, making people grind their teeth in frustration. Zhuyue gritted her teeth in anger, not wanting to say anything more. She felt like Gu Junqing knew something, then felt like he knew nothing, and suddenly felt again like he knew everything. In any case, she was nearly dizzy from being led in circles. Did you know I'm a woman? She shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the first firework explosion, causing Gu Junqing not to hear clearly. But from the look in Zhuyue's eyes, he knew what she had said. Yet he remained silent, deciding to wait a bit longer. Zhuyue also realized her voice had been covered by the fireworks and breathed a sigh of relief. She had mustered considerable courage to ask that question. However, she couldn't bring herself to say anything more now. She was captivated by the fireworks spectacle before her. The night sky resembled a vibrant flower garden, with colorful fireworks as dazzling as crystal gems and brilliant flames as magnificent as silk brocade. When the fireworks suddenly bloomed, they illuminated the entire horizon. Almost the entire starry sky was obscured by the fireworks. The night even died into daylight by the spectacular display. The sky above the entire city was illuminated, transforming everything beyond recognition. How could one ever see such firework beauty again? At that moment, the fireworks that seemed to light up the entire sky above Luludu made all who witnessed the scene sigh with emotion and offer their wishes. Though the beauty of fireworks cannot last forever, their momentary brilliance can achieve ultimate splendor, remaining eternally in people's hearts. The suddenly blooming fireworks quietly faded, melting together the ambiguous emotions in the air. Watching the still blooming fireworks, Zhuyue even felt they would never cease, making her heart beat violently along with their explosions. Thump, thump, thump. She pressed her hand against her chest, somewhat confused about what this emotion was. Junqing's mouth twitched. He hadn't expected that setting off half of Luodu's fireworks simultaneously would last this long. He couldn't even speak now. The surrounding sounds were completely overwhelmed by the fireworks. Even the occasional beast roars usually heard were now entirely absent. Junqing guessed the animals probably thought the two-legged creatures below the mountain had brought planes and artillery to attack them and didn't even dare breathe. As for Zhuyue and Baldi below the mountain, they had nearly exhausted themselves, directing the firework operators. They had no idea how long the young master wanted the display to continue. They could only follow the young master's instructions and set off all the fireworks until they were completely finished. Baldi commanded a group of men in black, shouting, hurry up, there's still a truckload of fireworks left. Keep them going without interruption." He had to shout. He was nearly deafened and could only rely on faint sounds through his earpiece to direct the others. Zhuyue yelled, "Faster! There's still a tractor load over there." This spectacular fireworks display lit up the sky for several hours straight, without a single pause. Chapter 64. Junqing looked helplessly at the continuously rising fireworks. He felt that Zhuyue was about to lay her cards on the table. The atmosphere had been perfectly built up, but the non-stop fireworks spoiled the mood instead. Junqing had not expected this himself. He had never used this method to pursue girls before, and had gotten too excited, buying far too many fireworks. However, seeing that Zhuyue was still watching happily, he felt relieved. The fireworks faded, and the noise gradually ceased. This hours-long display made the entire city of Luodu unprecedentedly vibrant. Not only were the major hotels fully booked, but even the small inns near the schools were packed. Everyone was awed and moved by the grandeur and romance of the fireworks. The love in people's hearts seemed ready to overflow, leaving them no choice but to express their feelings to those around them. There were countless theories about the origin of the display. Some said it was a wealthy young master spending extravagantly to pursue a girl. Others wondered whether Luodu's richest heir, Wang Sheyu, had arrived. On the mountaintop, Zhuyue watched the magnificent fireworks feast come to an end, her heart filled with melancholy. This represented half of Luodu's fireworks inventory, all mobilized because of a single word from Junqing. It was a testament to his influence. "Master, was it beautiful?" Junqing asked, looking toward Zhuyue. After the spectacular fireworks, complete silence descended. His voice broke the tranquility, sounding somewhat abrupt. Zhuyue seemed to snap out of a daze. Although she usually preferred quiet, for some reason, her disciple's gesture made her exceptionally happy. It was as though something within her had begun to sprout and leap with joy. "Very beautiful. Thank you. You are truly master's good boy." Zhuyue spoke with a gratified expression. Junqing forced a smile after restraining himself for a long time. System notification. Female lead Zhuyue's favorability toward the host increased by 20. Villain points plus 10,000. Junqing looked at the notification. Zhuyue's favorability had already reached the level of admiration. Zhuyue clearly had not realized it yet. She still believed her feelings for Junqing were merely those between master and disciple. Next came the moment for truth-telling. He had been curious about Zhuyue's past for a long time. "Master, let's go. Your disciple has prepared some excellent wine for you. It is truly rare liquor. Spring is the doctor of flowers, and wine is the matchmaker of desire." Junqing gestured invitingly with his left hand. "Oh, how good is it?" Zhuyue followed him back to the small courtyard. "Wine that can get you drunk," Junqing thought with a smile. This wine had been exchanged from the system. It was said to be capable of intoxicating even immortals, let alone Zhuyue. Although Zhuyue's current strength was limited after falling from the 7th rank, she was still a transcendent expert. She could usually drink ordinary liquor like water, without becoming intoxicated. Their physical endurance and metabolism were on an entirely different level. To make such an expert drunk, only system-exchanged wine would suffice. When Junqing poured a cup for Zhuyue, she held it up to the light for careful inspection. The premium liquor appeared clear and pure, crystal transparent without the slightest sediment, faintly golden like divine nectar. When gently swirled, delicate ripples formed along the cup's edge like flawless silk drifting across the surface. It was utterly intoxicating. Zhuyue gently sniffed it, finding the aroma rich and lingering. Her eyes lit up. She had never encountered such fragrant wine before, as its quality was clearly extraordinary. Taking a small sip, the mellow fragrance spread across her palate, perfectly balancing sweetness and depth. Excellent wine, Zhuyue exclaimed happily. Gu Junqing poured himself a glass as well. This bottle was not cheap, so naturally, he had to enjoy some too. Master, just drinking is boring. How about we play a game? Gu Junqing wore his signature fox-like smile. Sure, what should we play? Zhuyue asked curiously. Let's play truth or dare. Fine, then I will go first. Truth or dare. Having drunk some wine, Zhuyue was already feeling bold. Truth, of course. How many girlfriends have you had? Zhuyue asked curiously. Probably 3. Gu Junqing thought for a moment, counting Luo Ningyu, Mirongwan, and Yumiajin. Although things with Mirongwan were not fully acknowledged yet, their relationship had become extremely intimate, so she certainly counted. Oh. After hearing his answer, Zhuyue felt an inexplicable bitterness and responded with a dry acknowledgement. She drained her glass in one gulp, poured another, and regained her composure. All right, now it is my turn to ask. Master, are you actually a woman disguised as a man? Gu Junqing asked directly. Although Zhuyue had vaguely sensed that Gu Junqing knew something, she had not expected him to ask so bluntly. Nevertheless, she answered quickly. Yes, that is right. Seeing her admit the truth, Gu Junqing smiled inwardly. As expected, the system had not misled him. Zhuyue indeed trusted him deeply. In the original story, even Su Chen had not learned this secret until much later. All right, my turn now, Zhuyue said. Her face beneath the mask was already flushed from the alcohol. Do you think your master treats you well? She asked, avoiding his gaze. I think master treats me very well. I really like master. Gu Junqing said it shamelessly. The words made Zhuyue blush even more, and she turned her eyes away entirely. Gu Junqing poured her another glass. Where are you from, master? He stared at her intently. Even in the later parts of the original story, Zhuyue's origins were never revealed. It was only mentioned that she preferred seclusion, and had suffered serious injuries, without any explanation of who had harmed her. Gu Junqing suspected the answer lay beyond Su Chen's storyline, or perhaps the author had simply never filled in the gap. Zhuyue hesitated, clearly debating whether to speak. After a long pause, she slowly said, I come from a hidden sect, the Profound Heaven sect. Without waiting for further questions, she continued drinking and pouring more wine for herself, clearly wanting to confide in someone. My father is the sect leader of the Profound Heaven sect. When I was young, he treated me very well. I could do whatever I wanted and learn whatever I wished. But things changed later. My medical skills and martial arts became exceptional, and I gained considerable influence within the sect. Then everything changed after one person appeared. Zhuyue's eyes darkened, tinged with both hatred and fear. He started as a mere menial laborer, but for some unknown reason, he suddenly rose to prominence. Not only did he quickly become the head disciple, but even many elders were no match for him. And he took a liking to me, demanding that my father marry me to him. My father believed this man was the hope for the sect's revival. Even though I held status within the sect, he was determined to force the marriage. I resisted. I did not want to marry anyone. I only wanted to wed someone I truly loved, and he was not that person. So I ran away. After saying this, Zhuyue downed her drink in one gulp. Chapter 65. After I escaped, he still managed to find me. During my attempt to flee again, he injured me, and the wounds have not fully healed even now. Zhuyue spoke with a bitter tone. The atmosphere between them shifted from earlier cheerfulness to solemn silence. Zhuyue was lost in memories of her past. Meanwhile, Gu Junqing had already grasped several key points. According to her account, this laborer, who rose to become the senior disciple, fit perfectly into the mold of a protagonist. He was a particularly troublesome one at that, the invincible type. Then why did you not like him, master? Gu Junqing asked. Because his methods were excessively cruel. Those who lost to him never met a good end, and he even targeted the families of those he defeated, committing acts of violation against women. Zhuyue spoke with undisguised disgust. Gu Junqing fell silent. In his view, eliminating threats root and branch was perfectly normal. Victors became kings, losers became bandits. Moreover, his own methods were not exactly cleaner than that protagonist's. One enjoyed violating women, the other delighted in betraying the master and destroying the ancestors. One carried on Cao's legacy, the other inherited Yang Guo's spirit. Gu Junqing coughed twice, quickly cutting off his train of thought. He was supposed to be a respectable person, after all. Noticing Zhuyue continuing to drink alone in melancholy, Gu Junqing hurriedly stopped her. It would not do for her to drink herself into trouble. Master, playing truth or dare is getting boring. How about we switch to dare? I will go first this time. Gu Junqing widened his eyes, full of anticipation. Fine by me. Zhuyue even shot him a challenging look, clearly already somewhat intoxicated. Master, take off your mask. Let me see what you look like. Off it is. Who is afraid? I have worn this thing long enough anyway, Zhuyue declared boldly as she lifted the mask away. Instantly, her appearance and aura imprinted themselves into Gu Junqing's sight. Even the widely experienced Gu Junqing could not help but marvel at her beauty. Her large, captivating eyes held deep, luminous pupils beneath long, dense lashes, bright and limpid like the crystalline waters of an autumn pond. Her nose was delicate and straight, the tip faintly pink. Her lips were full and crimson, their graceful curve almost inviting a kiss. The slight flush from the wine added further charm to her already exquisite face. Gu Junqing had known Ji Zhuyue was beautiful, but he had not expected her appearance alone to surpass Mirong Wan's. As for Lin Qingzu, she was still too young to have fully blossomed, and could not yet be compared. At present, there was likely no woman more beautiful than Ji Zhuyue. He sincerely admired her beauty. No wonder she wore a mask year-round, much like the Lanling King, Gao Changgong. Not only did it conceal her identity from the profound heaven sect, but it also spared others unnecessary distraction. Take Su Chen, for example. If he had seen such a face during lessons, would he have been able to focus on cultivation? Of course, Su Chen would not get the chance, but Gu Junqing could. Come, master, another toast. Gu Junqing slapped his chest boldly, declaring he would drink with her until they were both drunk. Ji Zhuyue revealed a faint, teasing smile. You are trying to get your master drunk so you can do something wicked, are you not? Ahem, master. What kind of person do you take me for? How could I possibly do such a thing? Gu Junqing spoke with righteous indignation. Oh, I was going to ask you to come to my room and give me a massage. Since that is the case, forget it. Ji Zhuyue no longer concealed her true voice. Its melodious, enchanting tone instantly stirred Gu Junqing's excitement. How could I let master tire herself? Something as simple as a massage is no trouble at all. Leave it to me. Gu Junqing patted his chest eagerly. It seems you really do have ulterior motives toward your master. The other day, when you took off your pants, that was intentional too, was it not? Hearing Ji Zhuyue's increasingly dangerous tone, cold sweat formed on Gu Junqing's back. It seemed she had not completely lost her clarity after all. It probably would not be easy to coax her into bed. But then again, Gu Junqing reconsidered. Perhaps there was still room to maneuver. Master, how could I possibly have such thoughts? Master, did you not say earlier that your old injuries have accumulated and even weakened your strength significantly? I want to heal your injuries. I know a miraculous cultivation method with a part specifically for healing. It is highly effective for treating wounds. Gu Junqing spoke solemnly, pretending complete seriousness. Oh, really? What method is it? His words instantly sobered Ji Zhuyue somewhat. The continual decline of her strength had long weighed heavily on her mind. Originally, she had intended to rely on her connections to protect herself, even to confront that former laborer. But as her power waned, she abandoned resistance and chose seclusion instead. Now that Gu Junqing claimed to possess a healing method, she grew eager to hear more. The ancients who understood the Tao followed yin and yang, harmonized with numerical principles, ate and drank in moderation, lived regularly, and avoided overexertion. Thus their form and spirit remained united, allowing them to live out their natural lifespan. Gu Junqing slowly recited passages from the Yellow Emperor's inner canon related to healing injuries. Indeed, the canon could heal Ji Zhuyue's wounds, except he deliberately omitted one crucial detail. It required dual cultivation between two people. This left Ji Zhuyue deeply conflicted. First, she did not know how effective this method truly was. It sounded profound, but its practical results were uncertain. Second, Gu Junqing was her disciple, one who had formerly undergone apprenticeship rites. She could not simply pretend those rites were equivalent to marriage. Third, she feared what might happen if they truly engaged in dual cultivation. All these thoughts caused her to hesitate. On one hand were countless obstacles. On the other, her long-standing desire to heal her injuries and restore her strength. As Gu Junqing waited for her response, he quietly poured more wine for both of them. Lost in thought, Ji Zhuyue absent-mindedly lifted her glass and drank again. Seeing her prolonged hesitation, Gu Junqing understood. Even though her favorability had nearly reached admiration, it still was not enough for her to abandon worldly restraints. Yet if he had not become her disciple in the first place, their relationship might never have grown this close. So even though he knew this path created obstacles, Gu Junqing did not regret it at all. Of course, he firmly believed this was not due to any peculiar personal preferences. It was simply because he enjoyed taking on difficult challenges. Chapter 66. Seeing Ji Zhuyue still unable to make up her mind, Gu Junqing said thoughtfully, Master, if you are worried about the effects, we can first try the initial method from the Yellow Emperor's inner canon. Gu Junqing looked into Ji Zhuyue's eyes seriously as he spoke, making it clear he was not deceiving her. Then what do we need to do? When we practice, our entire bodies will generate heat, so we must choose an open, uninhabited place. All clothing must be loosened during cultivation, to allow the heat to dissipate immediately, without the slightest obstruction. Otherwise, if the heat turns inward and accumulates, the mild consequence would be serious illness, and the severe one could be death. Gu Junqing was directly quoting Old Master Jin's description of cultivating the plain girl's heart sutra. He intended to recreate the situation between Yang Guo and the little dragon girl during their training. This should gradually lower Ji Zhuyue's psychological defenses. You are not lying to me, are you? Ji Zhuyue stared at Gu Junqing with clear suspicion. How could I possibly lie to you, master? Gu Junqing spread his hands helplessly. Of course, this was an act. He could not allow Ji Zhuyue to grow suspicious. In truth, Gu Junqing did not actually need clothing removed to treat her injuries, since they were not truly cultivating the plain girl's heart sutra. But if he could gain a little benefit for himself, why not? Though he remained calm outwardly, inwardly he was already laughing with satisfaction. Seeing his earnest expression, Ji Zhuyue gradually began to believe him. Still, loosening her clothing in front of Gu Junqing was extremely difficult for her to accept. Master, there is no need to care too much about worldly opinions. Isn't that what you taught me? Besides, no one will know. If you are still uneasy, I am willing to blindfold myself with a black cloth, and not look at all. Would that be acceptable? Gu Junqing spoke with an expression suggesting that if even this was not enough, there was nothing more he could do. As he spoke, he poured more wine for Zhuyue. Liquid courage emboldened the timid, and wine could dull hesitation. If Zhuyue were completely sober and rational, Gu Junqing would not dare push matters this far. Zhuyue drank, while thinking. If it is only like this, it seems acceptable. After all, he will not be able to see anything. Moreover, it is only for treatment and healing. Nothing will happen. She drained her cup and made her decision. All right, we will do as you say, disciple. But if you dare to look. After speaking, Zhuyue formed scissors with her fingers and aimed them toward a certain part of Gu Junqing before snapping them shut in a cutting motion. Gu Junqing's scalp tingled, and he instinctively pressed his legs together. It seemed he truly could not make any reckless moves. Resigned, Gu Junqing blindfolded himself with a black cloth, completely blocking his vision, and allowed Zhuyue to lead him to the cultivation site. He sensed tall reeds around them and heard water lapping nearby. They were likely close to a water source. All right, I am going to loosen my clothes now. Do not look, okay, Zhuyue said with a charming laugh, her melodious voice oddly alluring, as if tempting him to peek. Gu Junqing felt both annoyed and amused. She had just threatened him, yet now seemed to be teasing him. But if he really removed the blindfold, tomorrow might truly be disastrous. Is this what women are like? He thought helplessly. He forced himself to calm down, warning himself not to act impulsively. Zhuyue adjusted Gu Junqing's posture and began removing his outer clothing. During the process, her face flushed uncontrollably. There was no helping it. Gu Junqing used the excuse that he could not see and insisted she assist him. Seeing how much he had already done for her, Zhuyue reluctantly helped. Naturally, this led to another awkward encounter with Gu Junqing's handle. Though it was not the first time, she was still extremely embarrassed, sneaking glances despite herself. It felt unfair. Gu Junqing could not see her, yet she had already examined him thoroughly. Since he supposedly would not know, she allowed herself a few more curious looks. But did Gu Junqing truly not know? Not necessarily. Beneath the black cloth, a faint golden glow flickered in his eyes. He smiled inwardly. Master, even a clever fox like you can miscalculate. You never expected your obedient disciple to possess golden eyes, did you? A mere cloth, even a wall, cannot block my sight. He watched as Zhuyue repeatedly glanced at him, which stirred him slightly. In the most literal sense, something reacted. Zhuyue gasped softly in surprise. Master, hurry up, Gu Junqing said helplessly, forcing himself to suppress the heat rising within him, while deliberately facing slightly away so she would believe he could not see. Zhuyue waved her hand before his eyes. Seeing no reaction, she finally relaxed. She had been startled earlier by his sudden reaction. After a brief hesitation, she removed her own clothing as well. Her snow-white skin and graceful figure seemed sculpted from jade, her proportions perfectly balanced and radiant under the moonlight. Gu Junqing watched everything as if viewing a live broadcast, and felt warmth rising to his nose. Zhuyue then sat cross-legged upon a prepared mat and extended her jade-like arms, pressing her palms against Gu Junqing's. To demonstrate the treatment's effectiveness, Gu Junqing circulated the healing chapter of the Yellow Emperor's inner canon with full effort. Zhuyue felt waves of warmth flow from his arms into her body. Her long-worsening injuries actually began to improve. Overjoyed, she became convinced of his claims. But suddenly, the warmth stopped. She opened her eyes to see Gu Junqing drenched in sweat, his lips trembling as if from severe exhaustion. Alarmed, Zhuyue hurriedly asked, "What is wrong with you?" Chapter 67. What is wrong with you? Zhuyue asked, her voice laced with anxiety. Because I am the only one circulating the cultivation technique, and we failed to achieve yin-yang harmony, my inner breath has become disordered. Gu Junqing appeared increasingly pained as he spoke. His face alternated between red and pale. Of course, this was all an act. How else could he lure Zhuyue into his trap? His strained expression made Zhuyue extremely anxious. How can I help you? Her urgent tone almost made Gu Junqing reconsider deceiving her, though that was impossible. You need to absorb the cold energy from my body. Because I transferred the heat to you, cold energy accumulated within me when yin-yang harmony was not achieved. It was only a one-sided transfer. Do not worry, this will not harm you. In fact, it may even accelerate your injury recovery, but this cold energy is harmful to me. Gu Junqing feigned urgent distress, appearing as though he might collapse at any moment. In truth, it was all nonsense. He simply said whatever would convince Zhuyue. He deliberately used obscure terminology to make it sound convincing. Zhuyue hesitated, uncertain whether he was deceiving her or telling the truth. Seeing his pained expression, she finally made up her mind. You troublemaker. She sighed and followed Gu Junqing's instructions. After a while, Zhuyue realized Gu Junqing was not transferring energy, as he had claimed. By then, she understood she had been deceived. Yet, for some reason, she found herself immersed in the moment. She wrapped her arms around Gu Junqing's neck, relying on him to maintain her balance. Sighing inwardly, she remained shy yet influenced by the lingering alcohol. She found herself unwilling to think about the consequences. After a long while, Zhuyue collapsed into Gu Junqing's embrace, allowing him to savor the moment fully. They still maintained a posture resembling cultivation, through the plain girl's heart sutra. It took a long time before Zhuyue gradually regained her senses. Her previously hazy mind cleared. Do you even remember I am your master? Her face flushed with embarrassment, unsure why she had become so immersed earlier. Her mind, once clouded by alcohol, was now completely clear. She realized she was still curled up in Gu Junqing's arms. Zhuyue sighed helplessly. She had known he harbored ulterior motives when inviting her to drink. The alcohol had dulled her judgment. That was how she had ended up cultivating the Yellow Emperor's inner canon with him. Gu Junqing clearly had no honorable intentions. She should have seen through him sooner. How improper. Regaining clarity, Zhuyue quickly pulled away, preventing him from taking further advantage. Noticing that Gu Junqing still wore the blindfold, she sighed in relief. At least he had not removed it. After all, she still felt extremely embarrassed. She comforted herself with that thought. Had she known Gu Junqing had already seen everything through his golden eyes, who knew how she would have reacted? Gu Junqing smacked his lips slightly, as if savoring the experience. Master, I did not lie to you, did I? Do you not feel the accumulated injuries in your body have improved? He spoke lazily, like a satisfied cat. Having already gained some benefit, there was no need to push further. Zhuyue carefully examined her condition and discovered her injuries had indeed improved slightly compared to before. She had never expected even such limited contact could help her wounds. If they truly united in cultivation, complete recovery might actually be possible. Her expression grew uncertain as she realized her feelings toward Gu Junqing might truly be different. Otherwise, she would have rejected him long ago, regardless of whether it could heal her injuries. Yet now, not only had she tolerated his boldness, she had even indulged him. Humph. With a soft snort, Zhuyue blushed and forcibly cut off her dangerous thoughts. What was she thinking? Gu Junqing was her disciple, and there was a clear age gap between them. How could she entertain such improper ideas? She glanced at him and found he had already dressed, removed the blindfold, and was watching her with an amused smile. It almost looked as if he were considering how to devour her. Embarrassed by her own thoughts, Zhuyue hurried back to her room. She intended to prepare medicinal formulas to see whether her injuries could be healed without relying on such embarrassing methods with Gu Junqing. Gu Junqing shook his head. His medical skills were arguably superior to Zhuyue's, and through their recent interaction, he now understood her injuries better than she did. Her wounds had been inflicted by an extremely sinister technique. Without treatment through the Yellow Emperor's inner canon, only the person who injured her would likely be capable of healing them. This was probably intentional, to force Zhuyue into submission. That person had likely even imagined the circumstances under which she would beg for mercy. Unfortunately for him, Zhuyue was far more stubborn than expected. Even as her strength declined and her injuries worsened, she chose seclusion rather than submission. Gu Junqing narrowed his eyes. This opponent truly fit the template of an invincible-style protagonist, arrogant and possessive, preferring destruction over letting others have what he desired. A troublesome enemy indeed. Against such an opponent, Gu Junqing believed caution could never be excessive. With the temperament of a ruthless overlord combined with a protagonist's destiny, he was truly worthy of an invincible protagonist, he sighed inwardly. Even now, Gu Junqing had no reliable way to deal with him. He would have to rely on the system to grow stronger before considering confrontation. For now, he needed to thoroughly exploit Su Chen to build enough strength. After carefully preparing her formula, Zhuyue tested it with anticipation. She soon discovered that even her slightly improved injuries were completely unaffected. The wounds clung to her like maggots to bone, fundamentally incurable. Zhuyue sighed, abandoning hope of healing herself through medicine. It seemed the only viable method remained the healing chapters of the Yellow Emperor's inner canon. Moreover, whenever her injuries encountered the special true qi cultivated through that technique, they dissolved as if meeting a natural nemesis. Unfortunately, the energy Gu Junqing had transferred earlier was far too little, resulting in only minor improvement. Gnashing her teeth, Zhuyue felt increasingly certain that Gu Junqing had planned everything from the beginning. Step by step, he had broken through her emotional defenses, gradually dismantling the barriers she had built. A slow psychological breakthrough. At the thought, her cheeks flushed once more. Just a few days ago, she had been completely innocent regarding such matters. Now, all she could do was sigh and accept reality. Compared to healing her injuries and restoring her strength, this was still important. Chapter 68. Zhuyue was still reinforcing her psychological defenses. Meanwhile, Gu Junqing was busy thinking about how to achieve even more intimate contact with her. Elsewhere in Luodu, the city was divided into 4 major territories. The underground forces that had long ruled the northern district had recently been swallowed up by Yang Shixing of the eastern district. Now, Yang Shixing was planning to annex the southern district. Inside a villa in the western district, a subordinate reported to Chen Lingyu, Sister Chen, that Yang Shixing is riding high on success right now. He is currently annexing the southern district, but he will definitely set his sights on our western district next. Chen Lingyu had descended the mountain and become the underground boss of the western district. Her martial prowess was exceptional, and she always fought at the front lines, attracting many loyal followers. Those around her looked at Chen Lingyu's stunningly beautiful face and sighed in admiration. They could not understand how someone who looked like a young girl could be so formidable in combat. She treated her subordinates extremely well and always charged into battle first. The only issue was her lack of ambition. She was content guarding her own territory, and even her position as boss had been forced upon her by her subordinates. Yet her authority among them remained unquestioned. Because she always led from the front, her subordinates felt ashamed to lag behind a young woman. As a result, during every gang fight, the Western District forces fought with unmatched ferocity. Chen Lingyu herself was not afraid, but her subordinates refused to lose face, so they gritted their teeth and followed her into battle. That was how they secured such a large territory in the Western District. Exactly. Even that pockmarked Yang, who had 2 fingers chopped off for offending someone, is strutting around proudly now, another subordinate complained. The pockmarked Yang he referred to was the same brother Yang who had offended Gu Junqing and lost his fingers on Gu Junqing's orders. The gathered subordinates looked at Chen Lingyu expectantly. Recently, Yang Shixing's forces had indeed grown increasingly arrogant, already controlling half of Luoda's underground territory. No one knew why Yang Shixing had suddenly gained so many followers and so much wealth. Many underground industries across Luoda had already fallen under his control. Clearly, someone powerful was backing him, most likely one of the 4 great families. But ordinarily, those families looked down on underground affairs. Why would they suddenly want to unify Luoda's underworld now? Chen Lingyu was deep in thought as well. She had no idea who was supporting Yang Shixing. Everyone she sent to investigate returned empty-handed. Even her close friend Ling Xuanja, an official law enforcer, had uncovered nothing substantial. The only information was that a mysterious force was backing Yang Shixing, suspected to be one of the 4 great families, though no confirmation existed. Chen Lingyu hesitated. With her strength, she could go anywhere without fear, and if things truly became dangerous, she could always return to the mountain to accompany her master, Master Zhu. Surely no one would dare cause trouble there. What she still did not know was that Master Zhu was actually a woman. Sister Chen, whether we fight or negotiate peace, you need to give us a clear answer. Otherwise, the southern district may not hold out much longer. If it falls, our western district will not stand alone either. That is right. The forces behind Yang Shixing are too powerful. Our strengths used to be balanced, but now we cannot compete. Their financial resources are overwhelming. They have even bribed influential figures who once supported us. Exactly, Sister Chen. We cannot hesitate anymore. What are you implying? That if Sister Chen does not decide, you will betray her. A loyal subordinate, noticing the hostile tone, retorted angrily. What do you mean? We are only thinking about Sister Chen's safety. Yang Shixing's arrogance is at its peak right now. The subordinates began arguing among themselves. Chen Lingyu watched as the hall, once harmonious like a family, descended into chaos. She waved her hand tiredly. All right, stop arguing. Let me think about it a little longer. Meeting adjourned for now. Seeing her weary gesture, the subordinates quietly withdrew. Chen Lingyu held her head in frustration. She was not a strategist, and deciding the future direction of an entire faction was far too difficult for her. She preferred charging into battle. Fighting was what she truly excelled at. If it were up to her, she would settle things with Yang Shixing through a fight rather than endless deliberation. But she could not ignore the lives of those who followed her. Ah, this is such a headache. If only junior brother So were here, she sighed. Having grown up under Zhuyue's care, she had met Su Chen before. However, she had left the mountain several years earlier than him, so they were not particularly close. She had only looked after him when he was younger. Even then, Su Chen's intelligence had amazed her. He mastered everything effortlessly. Wait, now that I think about it, Master mentioned arranging a marriage for junior brother Su. Could he have already left the mountain? Chen Lingyu's eyes lit up as realization struck. She immediately ordered a subordinate to prepare writing materials and personally drafted a letter, sending it to the address their master had specified to avoid interception. Their master had warned them that their sect had a formidable enemy, so they must remain cautious and never reveal their identities or techniques. That was why Chen Lingyu never used sect techniques in battle. Otherwise, with her current strength, she could likely capture Yang Shixing alive single-handedly, so long as the powerful families backing him did not intervene. Master, your disciple is in need of a strategist. When she reached the word strategist, Chen Lingyu scratched her head and had to ask a subordinate how to write it. Could you send junior brother to assist me? I do not know his current whereabouts, so please inform him to come to this location in the Western District. After finishing the letter, she checked it character by character, afraid of making mistakes and being scolded by her master again. She had never liked studying, and had often been punished by Zhuyue for it. Only after confirming the letter was complete and error-free did she sigh in relief and hand it to her subordinate. Writing always gave her a headache. Carefully forming characters felt far less satisfying than throwing punches in a fight. Still, she had to write it herself to convince her master. Otherwise, she would have delegated the task long ago. After instructing her subordinates to deliver it properly, Chen Lingyu slumped over her desk, her mind nearly exploding from the day's worries. She hated how complicated things had become. Humph. Just wait until I find out who is backing Yang Shixing behind the scenes. Chen Lingyu clenched her small fist, as if preparing to punch someone. Chapter 69. On the mountain, Gu Junqing gazed at Luodu in the distance, a faint smile playing on his lips. The transformation of Luodu's underground forces was part of the plan he had formulated before ascending the mountain. Whether to strengthen his own influence or to target Chen Lingyu, unifying Luodu's underground forces had become necessary. The world would no longer remain stagnant and unchanging. With Gu Junqing present, the shifting tides of the future would fall within his grasp. Even the so-called protagonists of destiny were no exception. With a leisurely smile, Gu Junqing returned to Zhuyue's side. You're back? Come quickly, your master needs healing. After being kissed by Gu Junqing, Zhuyue had come to understand her own feelings. She reasoned that she could still receive healing, and it was just a kiss after all, so she allowed herself to be more flexible. She convinced herself that her primary motivation was healing, not kissing Gu Junqing. Zhuyue thought this with a hint of Sundra pride. Her gaze toward Gu Junqing was intense, almost predatory. This instantly transformed Gu Junqing's earlier heroic ambition of holding the world in his palm into sheer terror. He had momentarily forgotten that Zhuyue was currently in a phase of heightened desire. Normally, having never been close to men, or at least not to one she fancied, she appeared ethereal and detached, as though untouched by worldly needs. But now things were different. Gu Junqing had given her a taste of kissing. Zhuyue had genuinely become somewhat addicted, using the pretext of healing to demand a kiss from him every day. At first, Gu Junqing had naturally been delighted, but now, touching his nearly chapped lips, he felt like crying inside. Even the most delicious dish might remain enjoyable after 10 servings, but after 80 consecutive servings, anything would become excessive. Of course, this was only an analogy. Gu Junqing still enjoyed it immensely. After all, a beauty's kiss was always sweet, even if it sometimes felt like being gnawed by a tiger or wolf. For now, however, things were limited to kissing. Zhuyue still maintained her boundaries. This stage alone already felt extremely transgressive to her. She did not allow Gu Junqing to take further liberties. Whenever his hands wandered, she would immediately sweep them away. Seeing the expectant look in Zhuyue's eyes, Gu Junqing had no choice but to sit cross-legged facing her. Leaning forward, he channeled the true qi from the healing chapter of the Yellow Emperor's inner canon into her. Strangely, however, the true qi transmitted through kisses was becoming increasingly ineffective, which only made Zhuyue more insistent. She sought another kiss more and more frequently. Today, Zhuyue sensed that the true qi Gu Junqing transferred had almost no effect at all. Anxiety rose within her. Having glimpsed hope for recovery, the lack of progress left her disheartened. Did she really have to dual cultivate with Gu Junqing? Zhuyue felt lost. Gu Junqing watched her expression with an amused, knowing smile. The methods of that invincible protagonist were not so simple. Otherwise, Zhuyue's own medical expertise would have long since healed her injuries. The fact that she had spent years unable to cure herself spoke volumes. Even if the Yellow Emperor's inner canon was a divine-level technique, it could not possibly eliminate such deeply rooted injuries with only a few traces of true qi. Of course, if Gu Junqing exerted his full effort, there was a chance he could cleanse the affliction entirely. But why shouldn't he take the opportunity to gain a few benefits for himself? Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow, silently applauding his own cleverness. Finally, Zhuyue opened her eyes and sensed that her internal injuries had barely changed. She lowered her head dejectedly, her expression practically saying, "You're useless now," and waved her hand dismissively, wanting to be alone. Gu Junqing respectfully retreated from the room, knowing Zhuyue had already seen a glimmer of hope and would not give up easily. Now it only depended on when she would be willing to let go of her prejudices and admit that Gu Junqing was not merely her disciple, but could also become her man. Suddenly, Gu Junqing had a brilliant idea. Recalling 2 famous novels from his previous life, a faint smile appeared on his lips. He returned to his room, or rather, Su Chen's room, which had now become his. This had been personally approved by Zhuyue. After all, Su Chen, the ungrateful disciple, who did not even wish his master a happy birthday, was unlikely to return anytime soon, so she had simply given the room to Gu Junqing. Those were Zhuyue's exact words. This was what they called the cuckoo occupying the magpie's nest. Gu Junqing sleeping in Su Chen's room, while kissing Su Chen's master. Thinking about it this way felt rather wicked. Gu Junqing almost burst out laughing. After returning to the room, he stayed up all night writing down 2 master-disciple romance novels, The Condor Heroes and The Journey of Flower. Naturally, he made a few adaptations of his own. He wrote them slightly more boldly, yet still properly, without crossing inappropriate boundaries. Although adaptation should not be reckless and elaboration should not become nonsense, adding a touch of personal interpretation was perfectly acceptable. Gu Junqing let out a wicked smile. He had even imagined suitable character dynamics for the master and disciple within the stories. He believed that after Zhuyue read these books, she might truly come around, since the master and disciple relationships within the stories went even further than theirs. Working through the entire night, even with his exceptional memory and rapid writing speed, Gu Junqing barely finished both books by dawn. After completing them, he brought the manuscripts to Zhuyue. "Master, I know you usually enjoy reading novels. I have 2 excellent books here for you." "Oh, what books?" Zhuyue, who had just woken up, habitually gave Gu Junqing a kiss. When it produced no effect, she felt slightly listless. But hearing about new reading material immediately lifted her spirits. The Condor Heroes, Master and Disciple's Storm, The Affairs of Flower and the Calligraphy? What kind of titles were these? Zhuyue felt puzzled by their unusual names. Yet the moment she opened the books, she became completely absorbed. This world differed somewhat from Gu Junqing's previous life. The literature and cultural works were not the same, meaning these stories did not exist here. Thus, he had no concern that Zhuyue might have read them before. Watching Zhuyue immerse herself fully in the stories, Gu Junqing felt a surge of emotion. Even if he had been reborn into an ordinary family, he could probably still have made a living. For example, by writing songs or novels. He might even have become a renowned author or a star in the entertainment industry. After all, many works from his previous life were masterpieces, the crystallization of an entire world's culture. Such works would inevitably create a powerful impact when introduced into a similar cultural environment. Chapter 70. Thinking this way, I wonder if this world also has such protagonists. Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow, contemplating the possibility. Moreover, such protagonists would be easy to deal with. Whether through copyright claims or manipulation of public opinion, they could be subdued without difficulty. They might even be easier to handle than Lin Tian. At present, Gu Junqing most enjoyed dealing with opponents who lacked combat strength. To him, such protagonists were no different from sheep waiting to be sheared, easy to exploit. He even wished for a few more to appear. He certainly would not show mercy just because they were fellow transmigrators. Besides, those who relied on memories of their past lives to claim famous works as their own were hardly good people, failing to credit the original creators, while proudly declaring themselves great talents, superstar singers, poets, or all-round geniuses capable of composing songs, writing poetry, and authoring novels. Gu Junqing felt absolutely no psychological burden exploiting such individuals. After all, they were exploiting others first, merely plagiarizing the achievements of renowned figures from their previous world. By exploiting them in return, he was simply repaying them in kind. And was not effortless, stress-free exploitation even more satisfying? Noticing Zhuyue completely immersed in the novel, Gu Junqing quietly left the room. He continued pondering future developments. Preparing in advance was the key to turning passivity into initiative. Gu Junqing lay down in the outer room of Zhuyue's residence, estimating that he might be staying there again tonight. Perhaps, if Zhuyue remained captivated by the novel, she might even allow him to become her intimate companion sooner than expected. With these thoughts, Gu Junqing sat cross-legged and resumed cultivating. His current strength was still insufficient. He planned to subdue Zhuyue and obtain a substantial amount of villain points, keeping only a small reserve as backup. For now, improving his strength remained the highest priority. After all, the invincible protagonist who had injured Zhuyue was not someone to be underestimated. To have wounded her at her peak, even if Gu Junqing could fight above his level, that protagonist's strength must have been at least 6th rank at the time. Now, years later, given the growth rate typical of protagonists, Gu Junqing estimated that his enemy had likely reached at least 8th rank, possibly even 9th rank. In contrast, Gu Junqing's current strength was only 3rd rank, equivalent to combat power slightly above 300, far inferior to that invincible protagonist. Fortunately, it did not seem time for that protagonist to appear yet. Even Su Chen was only beginning his development. In the original story, Su Chen's plot progressed far into later stages without mentioning Zhuyue's enemy, likely because the author never expanded on it or abandoned the storyline altogether. Therefore, that invincible protagonist probably would not appear soon, giving Gu Junqing ample time to grow stronger and prepare. By noon, Gu Junqing prepared a meal and brought it to Zhuyue. Only when it was time to eat did she reluctantly set the novel aside. She had never read such a captivating book before. It was impossible to put down. However, disciple, by showing me this, are you trying to hint at something? Zhuyue narrowed her beautiful eyes, her expression turning slightly dangerous. She had long since stopped wearing her mask or cloak in front of Gu Junqing. There was no longer any need. After all, he had already seen her true appearance. Gu Junqing gazed at her breathtaking beauty and alluring figure, feeling warmth stir within him. But now was clearly not the time to be direct. Master, what are you talking about? I do not understand, Gu Junqing said, feigning confusion. His sincere expression and deliberate innocence might have deceived anyone unfamiliar with him. Unfortunately, Zhuyue now knew exactly how deceptive he could be. 9 out of 10 things he said were unreliable. A man's mouth was the devil's deception. Humph, as if I would believe you, Zhuyue snorted proudly. Gu Junqing felt somewhat helpless. His credibility in her eyes had long since vanished. Not only had he tricked her into practicing the Yellow Emperor's inner canon under false pretenses, he had also stolen her first kiss. Gu Junqing stepped forward boldly and embraced her. She resisted half-heartedly before yielding. After all, if she truly resisted, Gu Junqing would likely be kneeling and begging for mercy the next moment. Gu Junqing merely tapped the tip of her nose lightly as punishment. The intimate gesture made Zhuyue's cheeks flush red. It felt as though she was no longer bound by status or restraint. This was the first time they had grown close without using healing as an excuse. It felt like they were truly lovers, their foreheads gently pressed together. As Gu Junqing tried to take another step forward, Zhuyue did not resist, her face flushed with shy acceptance. Having just finished 2 master-disciple romance novels, she felt herself falling even deeper for him. Unconsciously, she had begun placing herself and Gu Junqing into the stories. On the cliff of broken hearts grows the grass of heartbreak. In the valley of no love blooms the flower of severed affection. The thought of being separated from Gu Junqing for over a decade in the valley of no love made her wonder whether she too would carve longing into her bones. If he were bound to a stone pillar and pierced with soul-breaking nails, she knew she would willingly bear such suffering for him. Though Gu Junqing had only stayed on the mountain for about 10 days, Zhuyue already felt deeply entangled, unable to understand why. Perhaps love sometimes needed no reason. Of course, while Zhuyue did not understand, Gu Junqing knew perfectly well. Did she really think the immortal drunkenness wine was merely for enjoyment? That liquor also clouded judgment and amplified emotions. Gu Junqing had spent a considerable amount of villain points to exchange for it. If his goal had only been to intoxicate her, such expense would have been unnecessary. The exchange had proven more than worthwhile. After reading the novels, Zhuyue's feelings for him deepened even further. Ding. Female lead Zhuyue's favorability toward the host has increased by 10, now at 70. Adoration. Host gains 20,000 villain points. Ding. The host has won the heart of important female lead Zhuyue. increasing great villain luck by 500 points. Ding. Female lead Zhuyue's protagonist luck has decreased by 500 points. Ding. The plot has undergone significant changes. Host rewarded with 30,000 villain points. Seeing such generous rewards, Junqing narrowed his eyes, pleasantly surprised. He estimated that these rewards were not solely due to altering Su Chen's storyline. The invincible protagonist's plot had likely been affected as well. With these rewards, his strength could improve significantly, giving him greater confidence in facing future developments. Junqing held Zhuyue close, their foreheads touching. Zhuyue's heart overflowed with affection, and she realized she could no longer bear being apart from him. She decided to bravely accept both him and her own feelings. At most, she could conceal her identity in the future. Though her strength could not grant immortality, it could prolong her life, so age was no obstacle between them. At least, in the eyes of Zhuyue and Junqing, it was no obstacle at all. Chapter 71. Zhuyue's swift surrender gave Junqing a clearer vision of how to pursue the female lead in the future. The female lead charm aura could deepen the female lead's first impression of Junqing, while the divine wine could intensify her feelings for him. For instance, if you drank the divine wine and Junqing did something touching beside you, you would be more inclined to develop favorable feelings toward him. By combining the effects of the female lead charm aura with the divine wine, along with some emotionally stirring scenarios that struck a chord with the female lead, her impression of Junqing would deepen. Coupled with Junqing's extraordinary charm that surpassed human limits, he would likely be like a walking aphrodisiac to the female lead, bulldozing his way through her defenses. Of course, the female lead charm aura only ensured a good initial impression from the female lead. The ultimate success still depended on practical actions and whether they could genuinely move her. Otherwise, no matter how high the favorability was, blindly acting like a simp could easily lead to failure. As Junqing attempted to remove Zhuyue's clothes, she even slightly lifted her body to accommodate his movements. She wondered if she had lost her mind to agree to Junqing's request so readily. But just then, a voice interrupted them. "Senior, your disciple has sent a letter," a somewhat aged voice called out. Junqing's body stiffened. He wanted to rush out and beat the person who had spoken. After a series of maneuvers, had finally convinced Zhuyue to agree to his request for a thorough treatment of her injuries. Someone had to disturb them unexpectedly. This left him visibly displeased. Zhuyue, whose face had been flushed red, now burst into a soft laugh. She felt that Junqing's darkened expression truly reflected his current mood. Normally, Junqing rarely showed his emotions on his face, but the current situation had clearly frustrated him so much that he did not bother hiding it. Yet this made Junqing seem more human. He is becoming less of a dog. Zhuyue thought to herself. All right, get up. It is not happening this time, we will talk about it later. Zhuyue pushed Junqing away with a smile and stood up on her own. Junqing was frustrated. The atmosphere had been perfectly set, like a billiard ball about to sink into the pocket, only to be abruptly halted. Though deeply regretful, there was nothing he could do but wait for the next opportunity. Zhuyue put on her mask and cloak again, her consistent attire for the past 10 years. She could not let outsiders see her, or word might spread and reach that person. Watching Zhuyue's lovely face and delicate figure gradually disappear from view, Junqing sighed. He stepped forward, pecked her still unmasked cheek lightly, and helped adjust her mask properly. Seeing Junqing fuss over her like a doting wife, Zhuyue giggled again. Her laughter was melodious and delightful, yet it stirred a tickling sensation deep within. Junqing tapped her head lightly. His relationship with Zhuyue was becoming increasingly natural. Gone were the initial formalities of a master-disciple relationship. Zhuyue had clearly accepted Junqing's various intimate gestures. This harmony further enhanced the rapport between them. Junqing and Zhuyue went out together and found a middle-aged villager from the foot of the mountain. The villager was delighted to see Zhuyue. "Divine Doctor Senior, your disciple has sent a letter." He respectfully presented a letter. He was arranged by Zhuyue specifically to deliver letters. Whatever news came from her disciples would first be sent to him. Although the Profound Heaven sect could only be considered a reclusive sect, it was still better to be cautious in all matters. Zhuyue expressed her thanks and offered him some money. The man looked reluctant and refused, saying that Zhuyue had treated so many people at the foot of the mountain without charging them, so how could he dare accept her money? If he accepted, he would not dare continue working for Zhuyue anymore. Zhuyue had no choice but to agree. She took the money back and instead gave the villager a prescription to help regulate his health. This gift delighted the villager immensely. After receiving the prescription, he thanked her repeatedly before leaving. Junqing and Zhuyue returned to the house. Zhuyue looked at the handwriting in the letter and sighed helplessly. With such messy writing, there was no need to guess. It was definitely from her eldest disciple, Chen Lingyu. Chen Lingyu's handwriting was impossible for anyone else to imitate, crooked and slanted, full of her unique personal style. After reading the contents of the letter, Zhuyue fell into thought. Although she did not particularly care about the unification or division of Luo City's underground forces, she was willing to help when it came to matters concerning her eldest disciple, Chen Lingyu. The problem was, Su Chen had not contacted her in a long time, and she had no way of reaching him at the moment. Zhuyue felt troubled. Su Chen had not even reached out to her on her last birthday. How was she supposed to find him now? Ever since he left the mountain, Su Chen had rarely been in touch with her. Gu Junqing smiled faintly beside her. Of course Zhuyue could not reach Su Chen. Right now, Su Chen was working at his cosmetics company, and he was even enjoying the blessing of the 996 work schedule. A hint of mischief flashed in Gu Junqing's eyes. Su Chen had already taken a leave of absence from school, and was no longer attending classes, focusing entirely on running the cosmetics company. He was working twice as hard to meet Li Zixu's demands, to make her cosmetics company successful, large, and strong. Unfortunately, what Su Chen did not know was that although the company was nominally Li Zixu's, the actual controlling shareholder was still Gu Junqing. In other words, Gu Junqing was now Su Chen's boss. Every bit of work Su Chen did ultimately benefited Gu Junqing. This was a strategy Gu Junqing had planned from the very beginning. Moreover, it was better to keep Su Chen absorbed in work and away from school, where he might interact with the female leads. Although Murongwan, Yumiajin, and Li Zixu at school were all fond of Gu Junqing, who knew what unexpected moves Su Chen, as the protagonist, might pull. Whether it was stealing them from Gu Junqing or Su Chen finding a new campus female lead, neither outcome would be good for Gu Junqing. So it was better to let Su Chen start his life as a corporate worker and office drone early. To ensure Su Chen stayed committed to his job, Gu Junqing even had the Gu family create numerous troubles for him. Sometimes there were shortages of raw materials, other times funding issues, keeping Su Chen overwhelmed and too preoccupied to think about anything else. Moreover, Gu Junqing had already charmed most of the female leads who were originally destined for Su Chen. As for the remaining female leads, some had not appeared yet, while others were not in Luo City. Whether new female leads would emerge was beyond Gu Junqing's control. With the information and knowledge from the books he possessed, he could only do this much for now. It could be said that Su Chen was even worse off than Lin Tian. Although Lin Tian had lost Lin Qingzu, Yumiajin, and Murongwan to Gu Junqing, it was still early in the game. At least Lin Tian had not started acting recklessly yet. Su Chen, however, was far worse off. Not only had his master Zhuyue, his destined heroine Li Zixu, and the wheelchair-bound heroine Shi Hanyan been taken by Gu Junqing, but even his senior sister Chen Lingyu was about to be charmed away by him. Unbeknownst to him, Su Chen was even working for Gu Junqing. Chapter 72. Moreover, Su Chen was being exploited to such an extent, working every day, and even putting in overtime. He could even be asked to work on holidays. This made Su Chen, who had only completed junior high school in his village, miserable, as he did not even have time to attend high school. Before he could even graduate from high school, he was forced to become a corporate drone. As a result, during this period, Gu Junqing's villain points had been reaped in abundance. After all, preventing Su Chen from improving his strength and influence, and making all his efforts benefit Gu Junqing instead, perfectly aligned with Gu Junqing's role as the destined great villain. It also significantly boosted his villain luck. System, show me my stats. Host, Gu Junqing. Combat power, 387, average person, 5. Charm, 120, beyond the limit. Great villain luck, 1,500. Villain points, 102,503. Skills, divine medical skill, grandmaster level piano, grandmaster level learning ability, grandmaster level appraisal technique, master level racing skills. Auras, female lead charm aura, mosquito repellent aura. Talent, golden eyes, second stage. Items, a parking fee receipt for a Mercedes-Benz at the foot of Mount Tai, a lost sheep, a bottle of beast milk snatched from a child, a Patek Philippe, a Bugatti Veyron, a slipper, a ring once worn by an elderly person, a bronze mask with a weeping and laughing ghost face, 10 billion in cash. Seeing that his villain points had surpassed 100,000, Gu Junqing was quite pleased. After all, this meant he could draw lots many times. Although most of the luck came from the female lead Zhuyue, Su Chen, the protagonist, had also contributed significantly, forcing Su Chen to become a corporate drone for a capitalist like Gu Junqing, before he even graduated, had severely damaged his luck, invisibly stripping away much of his destiny. At the same time, it provided a remarkable boost to Gu Junqing's villain luck. After all, having a protagonist work for you was a rare opportunity. How could a protagonist ever willingly work for their enemy, serve their adversary, and help their foe prosper? Just consider how, after a broken engagement, even when the other party was polite, apologized, and offered elixirs, the one being rejected would feel deeply humiliated, vow to seek revenge in the future, and eventually wipe out the other's entire family. A protagonist's dignity was not to be trifled with. Of course, this was no longer a matter of right or wrong but rather a question of perspective. The world is neither black nor white, but an exquisite shade of gray. If Su Chen were to find out he was working for Gu Junqing, he would probably cough up blood in fury. Naturally, Gu Junqing had no intention of revealing this yet. He would rather let Su Chen build the company up successfully first. Then, when the time was right, he would reveal that the company actually belonged to him, Gu Junqing. The look on Su Chen's face at that moment would surely be priceless. In the original storyline, Su Chen joined Li Zixu's cosmetics company, helped it thrive, and then won her heart through a series of heroic rescues. But since Gu Junqing was here now, he was not about to let the plot follow the original course. He directly purchased the company and kept it under wraps. Then, he pushed Li Zixu into the spotlight, collaborating with her, the Gu the official and Li Jinlian, to scheme against this Su Daolin. This was just one part of his plan to deal with Su Chen. Though not particularly brilliant, it was a case of killing with words and breaking the spirit. Moreover, Gu Junqing snapped back to reality and glanced at Zhuyue, who was still pondering what to do. Moreover, Su Chen's greatest backer, Zhuyue, was now almost becoming his woman. Gu Junqing smirked mischievously, wrapped his arm around Zhuyue's slender waist, and pulled her into his embrace. He found it incredibly thrilling to hold the female lead who originally belonged to Su Chen while simultaneously plotting how to deal with Su Chen. Zhuyue rolled her eyes at Gu Junqing, a gesture that carried an indescribable allure. This only heightened Gu Junqing's sense of accomplishment, stirring a restless excitement within him. He even considered resuming the grand endeavor they had left unfinished earlier. But Zhuyue had clearly regained her composure and stopped Gu Junqing's wandering hands. "Junqing, I just thought of a good idea," Zhuyue said with a smile. "What idea?" Gu Junqing asked, feigning ignorance even though he already knew what she was going to say. "Sometimes, to appease a woman, one must pretend to be clueless and let her take the lead. This keeps life interesting and playful. If you understand everything beforehand, you will eventually lose that sense of novelty. If you already know what I am going to say with just one look, why would I bother speaking? Anyway, your senior sister did not specifically request your senior brother to go. Since you are also my disciple, you could go help her instead. You are so capable, and with your intelligence and skills, you would surely do an even better job than your senior brother." Afraid that Gu Junqing might refuse to go down the mountain to assist Chen Lingyu, Zhuyue added a small compliment to persuade him. Hearing her words, Gu Junqing flashed another charming smile, one that even the accustomed Zhuyue found momentarily mesmerizing. Even in the profound heaven sect, there was no one as handsome as Gu Junqing. Gu Junqing leaned close to Zhuyue's ear, his voice low and magnetic. "Oh, am I capable?" The suggestive tone made Zhuyue blush furiously, and she raised her hand as if to hit him. Although she lacked Gu Junqing's experience in such matters, her age had taught her enough to recognize the double entendre in his words. If he dared to tease his master like this now, what would he do in the future? She needed to set some ground rules to prevent Gu Junqing from getting the upper hand. For some reason, this thought made her itch to take out her little whip and give him a lesson. Seeing her raised hand, Gu Junqing quickly surrendered, knowing he was still no match for her in strength and that his husbandly authority was not yet established. Once his strength surpassed Zhuyue's, he would make sure she understood just how capable he really was. He would show her what it meant to turn the tables, and what it meant to impart wisdom and fluids. Seeing him surrender without resistance, Zhuyue lowered her hand and looked at Gu Junqing expectantly. After all, it was her eldest disciple seeking help, and as her master, she had to offer assistance. Gu Junqing raised an eyebrow and finally agreed. He could not act too enthusiastic. How else would he secure some benefits? Although this had been part of his plan all along. Yang Shixing was his pawn, and Yang Shixing was trying to annex Chen Lingyu's territory, while Gu Junqing was going to help Chen Lingyu resist Yang Shixing. Gu Junqing himself felt a headache coming on. Was he playing both sides now? In the original story, it was this very plea for help that brought Chen Lingyu and Su Chen together, sparking a unique bond between them. And this time, it was Gu Junqing who went, so the plot was bound to be quite thrilling. Turning his hand to summon clouds and overturning it to bring rain, manipulating the winds and clouds of the entire lower capital, this was Gu Junqing's fundamental method now. Whether it was Yang Shixing or Chen Lingyu, in the end, they were merely pawns in his domination of Luo capital. Chapter 73. Yang Shixing, who was about to dominate the underground forces of Luodu's 3 major districts, was actually being supported from behind by Gu Junqing. The only remaining underground leader of the western district, Chen Lingyu, was Gu Junqing's senior sister. Both could essentially be considered Gu Junqing's own people. Gu Junqing had originally planned to descend the mountain this time, as it had been quite a while since his last visit. Suddenly, Gu Junqing's eyes sharpened as if he remembered something. Having stayed by Zhuyue's side all this time, he had almost forgotten his other commitments. He had largely neglected his other women over the past half-month or so. At most, he had only contacted them occasionally. He knew his return would not go smoothly. Nurong Wan and Luo Ningyu were as thick as thieves, and would likely join forces to confront him. As for Yumeajin, she would probably demand his full dedication this time. Thinking of Yumeajin at the age of the tigress and wolf, Gu Junqing could only pat his own waist and hope it could withstand the challenge. Lin Qingze would be easier to handle, a master of tea art who only knew how to say, unlike others, I only feel heartache for brother. A little comfort would probably suffice. Then there was Shi Hanyan, the female lead with the broken leg. Gu Junqing had not spent much time with her yet. Although he had subdued her with an overbearing CEO-like aura, he was not sure how long that would last. Gu Junqing felt a headache coming on. Was this what they called sweet troubles? Seeing Gu Junqing lost in thought, Zhuyue assumed he was pondering something important. In her imagination, he must be considering whether to leave, because he did not want to be apart from her. Her eyes softened momentarily. She suddenly felt that Gu Junqing was the destined one she had been waiting for, the person she truly wanted to wed. At this thought, her gaze grew even more tender, so tender it could drown Gu Junqing in its depths. If she had mind-reading abilities and discovered Gu Junqing was actually thinking about other women, she would probably be contemplating how to murder her own husband. What's wrong? Do you still have concerns? Zhuyue whispered tenderly in Gu Junqing's ear, blowing a gentle breath that carried obvious implications. Startled by her breath, Gu Junqing snapped back to reality. Seeing the sparkling brightness in Zhuyue's eyes, He chuckled wryly. Yes, yes. If I leave, won't my lovely and beautiful master be left all alone on the mountain again? Gu Junqing gently traced his left hand across Ji Zuyu's beautiful cheek. Gazing at Gu Junqing's face, Ji Zuyu grew emotional and embraced him. It was not just Gu Junqing who had become enchanted by Ji Zuyu's appearance, she too had fallen for his handsome features. Generally, the importance of appearance in attraction follows this pattern. Interest begins with looks, deepens with talent, remains through character, and settles with companionship. But Gu Junqing's appeal to others could be summarized as begins with looks, deepens with looks, remains through looks, and settles with looks. It's fine. Your master's injuries have mostly healed now, and I can already exert strength at the 6th rank. With 6th rank strength, I can protect you well enough for you to act tyrannically in Luodu. If you need your master's help, you can write to me, Ji Zuyu declared with some dominance. Gu Junqing had not told her yet that he came from the Gu family, one of Luodu's 4 great families. Even without her, Gu Junqing could already dominate in Luodu. Master, actually Gu Junqing began to explain, thinking it would be troublesome to clarify later. All right, no need to thank me. Interrupting him, Ji Zuyu mistakenly thought Gu Junqing was trying to express gratitude. Gu Junqing gave a helpless smile. Let's talk about that later. Master, since I'm about to descend the mountain now, shouldn't your disciple get some benefits? Your disciple might not see you for a long time, so shouldn't master give me some sweet rewards? Gu Junqing spoke with a hint of seduction. Ji Zuyu's face flushed with embarrassment. She knew what Gu Junqing wanted. She had nearly lost her senses earlier and almost given herself to him. Fortunately interrupted by someone. Can we discuss this later? I haven't made up my mind yet. Ji Zuyu turned away, unable to look at Gu Junqing. Is that so? Gu Junqing pretended to sound hurt. Then could you use a Gu Junqing seemed to have another idea, his eyes lighting up. After hearing what Gu Junqing said, Ji Zuyu hesitated. She feared that if she did this, she might truly lose all dignity before Gu Junqing in the future. But seeing Gu Junqing's slightly coquettish expression, Ji Zuyu felt defeated. Ah, you always know how to degrade your master. After speaking, her body gradually slid down like a beautiful serpent. After a while, Gu Junqing's expression gradually became pleasurable. Ding, host Gu Junqing has stirred the heart of female lead Ji Zuyu, making the female lead serve the host for the first time. Villain points plus 20,000. Hearing the system's announcement, Gu Junqing felt even more exhilarated. Indeed, this was the most satisfying way to earn villain points. Meanwhile, at Qing Snow Cosmetics Company, this company name was formed by taking one character each from Li Zixiu and Gu Junqing's names. Su Chen thought the company name meant sweeping snow from the doorstep, clearing obstacles from his path. He consistently praised Li Zixiu for choosing such an excellent name. Li Zixiu could only look at Su Chen with complex emotions. He did not even realize he was being cuckolded. It was like praising how beautiful the child born from his wife and her lover was. Li Zixiu facepalmed, realizing how far Su Chen fell short compared to Gu Junqing. When discussing company details with Gu Junqing, she had been astonished by his talent. The company's current orderly operation, from top to bottom, was not just due to the effectiveness of Su Chen's cosmetic formulas. More importantly, it was because of the strategies Gu Junqing had established from the beginning. This allowed Qing Snow Cosmetics Company to barely survive despite heavy suppression. Of course, this was deliberately designed by Gu Junqing, neither letting the company soar immediately nor allowing it to decline completely. Only with this semblance of hope would Su Chen wholeheartedly work for Gu Junqing. After all, when success seemed just one step away, what harm was there in trying a little harder? But Gu Junqing would always knock Su Chen down at such moments, which greatly frustrated Su Chen. Zixiu, why has the production line encountered problems again? Su Chen questioned Li Zixiu the moment he entered her office. This concerned not only his success, but also whether he could marry Li Zixiu and gain the Li family's support. He had found a manufacturer to develop cosmetics according to his formulas. In terms of effectiveness, beauty and skincare were guaranteed, even possessing rejuvenating properties that could reverse aging. He was confident that once the products hit the market, the company's performance would skyrocket and he, Su Chen, would become a rising star. Soon, it would be time to marry the beautiful and wealthy woman, become the CEO, and reach the peak of life. But for some reason, every time he thought everything was settled, minor issues would always arise, leaving him overwhelmed and running around in all directions. Chapter 74. Su Chen's face was somewhat gloomy, feeling that someone must be plotting against him behind his back. He was not that foolish, as he had long sensed that someone seemed to be targeting him covertly. But each time, the person was extremely cautious, leaving no evidence for him to uncover. The more this happened, the more suspicious Su Chen became. For instance, during the initial raw material procurement, the previously agreed upon price fell through, because the wholesale supplier suddenly backed out. When Su Chen went to seek other raw materials, the original company became willing to supply again. This made Su Chen waste a lot of effort for nothing. Su Chen felt that someone was scheming against him behind the scenes, but it was not that they completely wanted him to fail. Rather, they intentionally aimed to slow down his progress in developing new products. His first suspicion fell on Li Zixiu, because he knew that she deeply detested their arranged marriage and did not want to be engaged to him. So, she might be trying to disrupt this opportunity of his. But it was Li Zixiu who had initially made the request, so could she have changed her mind? Even so, it did not make sense. If she did not want to marry him, why not just let him fail outright? Su Chen was deeply puzzled. Of course, Su Chen could not be allowed to fail just like that. You harvest leeks only after they have grown, so who would cut them right after they sprout? Gu Junqing was already quite experienced in how to fleece sheep and harvest leeks. Su Chen's second suspicion was Gu Junqing. Although he had not really offended Gu Junqing, he had a vague intuition about it. This was why, not long after meeting Gu Junqing, he wanted to test him. He even considered giving Gu Junqing a couple of acupuncture needles to turn him into a eunuch. Moreover, Gu Junqing fit the role of a behind-the-scenes boss perfectly. This made Su Chen very wary. Most importantly, there was the incident of publicly defecating during the class exam. That event had caused Su Chen to lose face more than ever in his life. Gritting his teeth, he tried to recall the details of what happened that day. He found that the most suspicious thing was that he had drunk half a bottle of water from Li Zixiu. However, there were not many laxatives that would be effective on him, and it should have been difficult for Li Zixiu to obtain one. The most likely culprit was Gu Junqing, because Li Zixiu was on very good terms with Gu Junqing at that time, even referring to each other as besties. The one most likely to help Li Zixiu was Gu Junqing, and the way Gu Junqing looked at Li Zixiu was off. Su Chen thought with a cold laugh, so, you want to get rid of me, Li Zixiu's fiancé? After a long period of seclusion and reflection, combined with recent events at work, he had a sudden inspiration and arrived at this conclusion. One could only say, as expected of the protagonist, even with only a few clues, he could vaguely guess who was targeting him. Of course, the guidance of heaven and earth was crucial. Whether it was Su Chen's inexplicable intuition or his sudden inspiration, it was all the universe paving the way for him. The treatment of the heavens favored son was indeed different. But Su Chen was not entirely clear about Gu Junqing's motives for targeting him. He could only take it one step at a time, growing stronger to see the deeper truths. Su Chen walked up to Li Zixiu. Zixiu, what exactly went wrong with the production line this time? Why has work stopped again? Li Zixiu shot him a disdainful look. We're not that close. You can call me classmately, or just call me presidently. After saying this, Li Zixiu proudly straightened her posture, liking her identity as presidently now. She held great power. Although the company had little to do with her personally, she simply enjoyed this feeling. Perhaps it was also because she had been under others' control for too long. Moreover, President Su, aren't you overstepping your jurisdiction? Why are you meddling in this department? Li Zixiu could not even be bothered to lift her eyelids, continuing with her own tasks without paying him any mind. She found herself increasingly unwilling to engage with Su Chen, especially after establishing the company. She realized the vast gap between Su Chen and Gu Junqing. Even from thousands of miles away, Gu Junqing could meticulously plan every detail, calculating exactly where to trap Su Chen, or set up pitfalls as if he were personally present, leaving Su Chen completely outmaneuvered. In contrast, even when Su Chen handled matters personally, there were still numerous imperfections. Indeed, comparisons are inevitable. Although Su Chen's work was not flawless, he was, after all, just a high school student. Reaching this stage already required immense effort. But when compared to Gu Junqing, the disparity was glaring, and Li Zixiu increasingly felt that breaking off the engagement with Su Chen was for the best. In the original storyline, Li Zixiu had not picked on Su Chen's flaws so much, as she felt reassured by his presence, because he had saved the company from crises. Now, however, the company clearly did not need Su Chen's help. It had been established from the start to exploit him, making him work for nothing. But if we halt production, do you realize how much we'll lose? How many people are waiting to start work? We're still deep in debt. Su Chen suppressed his anger, refusing to vent his frustration. Do you think I want this? There's no other way. It's a new product category, and has to go through multiple rounds of testing. What can I do? Li Zixiu spread her hands helplessly, wearing an expression that said she was powerless to assist. Fine. Then coordinate as quickly as possible. Remember, this also determines whether you can break free from your fate. The furious Su Chen then pretended to be calm and composed as he walked out of Li Zixiu's office. Li Zixiu shot a disgusted look at Su Chen. She found him utterly repulsive, clearly seething with anger and concern, yet putting on a superior act. Indeed, Li Zixiu's initial motivation for starting the company was to escape the Li family's constraints. Only with real power in hand could she command respect and change her destiny. As the daughter of the Li family, even if she did not marry Su Chen, she might still be wedded to some young master or another promising individual. But she refused to accept such a fate, which was why she wanted to establish a company. Upon learning of Su Chen's exceptional medical skills, she had a sudden inspiration to leverage his abilities. But now, with Gu Junqing backing her, even her father had to treat her with seriousness. Clearly, there was no need to prove her capabilities through a company anymore. If necessary, she could simply ask Gu Junqing to take her away. With that thought, Li Zixiu began experimenting with new makeup looks. After all, in Gu Junqing's eyes, she was merely a decorative vase. If she did not maintain her appearance, she feared he might not even want her as a vase anymore. Moreover, it had been so long since she last saw Gu Junqing, she could only occasionally hear his voice. Gazing at the photos she had secretly taken of him, she found solace in these mementos, missing him deeply. After giving it some more thought, she finished applying a nice makeup look and left the company. She was heading to the school to annoy Mirongwan and Luo Ningyu. Recently, she had either been at the company or at school, competing against Mirongwan and the others. After all, she did not want to end up like Su Chen, working 996 hours, sometimes even worse. Chapter 75. After enjoying a series of services from Zhuyue using both her hands and mouth, Junqing readily agreed to her request for him to descend the mountain. After all, even without this request, he had already planned to go down the mountain. Since Chen Lingyu had sent the request, he was willing to use this method to get closer to her. His original plan was actually just to coincidentally meet Chen Lingyu. If he could establish a connection this way, it would be even better. This time, Junqing decided to drive back to Luodu himself, letting his subordinates follow behind. He accelerated directly to 100 kilometers per hour, then stretched his hand out of the window and sighed. This should be what Luo Ningyu feels like. Feeling something was not quite right, he pondered. Ningyu seems a bit bigger. This thought came to him because he had watched a movie in his previous life. The movie said that when you stretch your hand out of the car window, driving at 40 kilometers per hour gives you the feeling of an A cup, 60 kilometers per hour a B cup, 80 kilometers per hour a C cup, and 100 kilometers per hour a D cup. This is just a joke, folks. Definitely do not try it. But Junqing felt there was some inaccuracy, as even at 100 kilometers per hour, it did not quite match the sensation of Luo Ningyu. Sighing, Junqing accelerated again toward Luodu. Midway, the sound of another car approached, and someone called for him to roll down the window. Junqing was puzzled. Normally, people would avoid getting close to his luxury car, afraid that even a slight scratch or bump would cost them years of wages. When he rolled down the window, he realized it was a law enforcer's vehicle. "Sir, your current speed is slightly over the limit." Junqing had not expected the law enforcer to be such a beautiful woman. She had clear, watery black eyes, delicately arched eyebrows like a painting, an exquisitely straight nose, and a naturally charming face without any makeup, truly captivating. Her looks were definitely up to the standard of a female lead. Junqing had a sudden idea, and wanted to use his inside eye to see if she was indeed a female lead. Female lead, Ling Xuangxiu, age, 25, charm value, 92, average, 50, female lead luck, 672. Sure enough, she really was a female lead. Junqing smiled. He had not expected that just on a simple trip back to Luodu, he would encounter another female lead. However, her female lead aura was not too high, probably due to the protagonist's influence. Wait, Junqing thought carefully, a slight smile curling his lips. He realized who Ling Xuangxiu's female lead belonged to. He had discovered this female lead in Lin Tian's book. So, she was originally Lin Tian's female lead. Then is she not mine now? After all, he had already drained Lin Tian's luck. Ling Xuangxiu was also surprised that the person rolling down the window of such a luxury car was someone so young. And why did he look so familiar? Taking a closer look, she realized it was the young master of the Gu family. Ling Xuangxiu then understood. No wonder someone so young could drive a car of this caliber. It made sense if it was Junqing, the young master of the Gu family. She thought to herself that she had heard the Gu family's young master was handsome. She initially thought it was just a rumor, but she never expected him to be even better looking than the story said. She had long been curious about Junqing. Back when handling Lin Tian's case, this young master not only willingly handed over Lin Tian, who wanted to kill him, to the law enforcers, but also helped them dismantle a gambling den. This earned her a significant commendation, fostering a subtle fondness for Junqing that had lingered ever since. Ding. Female lead charm aura activated, increasing Ling Xuangxiu's favorability toward the host by 20. Current level, 40, love at first sight. Host's villain points increased by 4,000. Junqing raised an eyebrow. Although he knew that female leads might transfer their affections to the next male lead after the original one disappeared, he had not expected Ling Xuangxiu to fall for him at first sight. While the female lead charm aura played a role, it could only boost favorability by 20 points. It seemed Ling Xuangxiu had already held some goodwill toward him beforehand, so when the aura activated, it directly stacked to 40. Since driving side by side was not safe, Ling Xuangxiu slowed down and moved out of Junqing's sight. Her heart was now pounding rapidly, as this was the first time she had ever felt this way. Usually, she treated her male colleagues in law enforcement like brothers, so it was unprecedented for her to feel her heartbeat quicken just at the sight of a man. Steadying the steering wheel, Ling Xuangxiu noticed that Junqing's car had indeed slowed down and was no longer speeding. Her impression of him improved even more. He truly is the legendary law-abiding and dedicated young man. Despite being such a prominent scion, he not only respects and follows the law, but also steers clear of vices like drinking, womanizing, and gambling. Ling Xuangxiu sighed. If everyone were like Junqing, society would be much more harmonious. If Junqing knew what she was thinking, he would probably laugh himself awake. His current image was largely shaped by his recent actions and public opinion. Portraying himself as a moral exemplar ensured that public sentiment would side with him. As the saying goes, favorable timing is not as good as favorable terrain, and favorable terrain is not as good as harmonious human relations. These three elements are crucial for achieving great deeds. Since the protagonist had already ceased favorable timing, Junqing could only rely on leveraging terrain and public support to suppress him. Moreover, was it not amusing that a destined great villain was being molded into a moral paragon? He was a villain, not a fool. While he would stop at nothing to achieve his goals, he could not afford to lose popular support. Many villains were defeated by the protagonist precisely because they failed to protect their reputation or had their scandals exposed, leading to a shift in public opinion. Gu Junqing, however, would never give anyone that opportunity. He had mastered the art of controlling hearts and minds to the extreme. Even if he were truly behind certain incidents, he would likely believe it by then. "Ah, I forgot to ask for her contact info," Gu Junqing muttered with a hint of regret as he watched Ling Shuangxiu's car fade into the distance. A woman who had already fallen in love at first sight would be the easiest to win over. With his charm, he estimated it would take at most a week to seize her luck. But for now, he could only entertain the thought. After all, there were still several female leads he had not consumed yet. Gu Junqing could only sigh at the long road ahead, as he needed to focus on bolstering his health. He pondered how he would face them upon his return, especially since Mirongwan and Luoningyu had been waiting for quite some time. Their relationships had not yet reached the stage of one needle, one effect. Then there was Lin Qingzu, who was also not an option, as she was still too young. He did not want to be instantly smitten by Ling Shuangxiu only to get locked up by her for 3 years right after, though 3 years would be quite the bargain. Of course, these were just jokes. Even if Gu Junqing wanted to get himself locked up, it would be difficult. The real challenge was how to satisfy Yumeajin. Gu Junqing patted his kidney with his right hand and muttered, "Buddy, it's all up to you." To be continued. Hope you liked today's video. Join the community by subscribing and dropping a like. I'll be back with another update as soon as possible. See you then.